Millionaire father disowns his son for loving a poor black girl. 10 years later, that son buys his entire business empire. 10 years ago, Jason Statham threw his only son out of their mansion for loving a poor black girl. Today, that same son just bought everything his father ever owned. Hey family, welcome back. It's been a while, but this one'll break your heart and heal it at the same time. So grab a drink, settle in, and buckle up, because today, we're diving into a story about love, betrayal, and the kind of justice that takes a decade to deliver. This is the story of a millionaire father who disowns his son for loving a poor black girl, and 10 years later, that son buys his entire business empire. Now, before we dive in, I want you to think about something. If someone you loved asked you to choose between them and your entire family fortune, what would you do? Drop your answer in the comments. Because this choice? It changed everything. The skyline glittered like scattered diamonds against the gray afternoon sky. Tower cranes stretched above construction sites, their skeletal frames a reminder that even the most permanent-looking cities were always rebuilding, always transforming. But inside the top floor of Statham Tower, a glass and steel monument to corporate dominance, nothing felt like transformation. It felt like an ending. Jason Statham sat behind his mahogany desk, a Cuban cigar smoldering between his fingers, his sharp blue eyes fixed on the contracts spread before him. His silver hair was combed back with military precision, his tailored charcoal suit pressed without a single wrinkle. At 63, he still carried himself like a man who owned every room he entered. And until recently, he had Statham Industries, real estate, steel, shipping, tech acquisitions. For 4 decades, Jason had built an empire that stretched across 3 continents. His name meant power. It meant fear. It meant you didn't cross him, and if you did, you learned quickly what it cost. But empires, like men, could bleed. The quarterly reports lying before him told a story his pride refused to accept. Revenue down 18%. Stock prices plummeting. Board members whispering about votes of no confidence. Creditors circling like vultures. He took a long drag from his cigar and let the smoke curl toward the ceiling. 40 years, he muttered to himself, his British accent clipped and cold. 40 bloody years, and they think they can take it from me. His assistant, Gregory, a thin man in his 40s with nervous hands, knocked softly before entering. Mr. Statham, the representative from SoulLink Holdings will be here in 20 minutes. Jason didn't look up. And the documents? Prepared, sir. If you sign, they'll inject $300 million in exchange for 51% controlling shares. It's the best offer we've received. Best offer, Jason repeated bitterly. You mean the only offer? Gregory shifted his weight. Sir, if we don't accept. I know what happens if we don't accept. Jason's voice was ice. I'm not senile, Gregory. Just make sure everything is ready. I want this done quickly. Whoever this M. Carter is, I don't need them gloating. Yes, sir. Gregory left, and Jason stood, walking toward the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. Somewhere below, millions of people moved through their small lives, unaware that above them, a titan was about to fall. He pressed his palm against the cold glass. It shouldn't have come to this. But it had. And the worst part? He knew exactly when it started. 10 years earlier, Atlanta, Georgia. The memory came unbidden, sharp as broken glass. Matthew. Jason closed his eyes, and suddenly he was back in the sprawling Statham estate in Buckhead. The night everything shattered. Matthew had been 24 then. Young, idealistic, brilliant. Fresh out of Oxford with honors in economics and computer science, the boy had every advantage in the world. He was supposed to take over the company, to carry the Statham name into the next generation. Instead, he'd walked into Jason's study that evening with a black girl on his arm. Not just any girl. A waitress. A poor, struggling nobody from the West End with dreams bigger than her bank account and a smile that Jason found insufferably bright. Coco Jones. Jason could still see her standing there in that simple yellow dress, her natural hair pulled back, her dark eyes cautious but defiant. She'd known she wasn't welcome. She'd known what Jason thought of her. And Matthew. Foolish, lovesick Matthew had looked at his father with hope in his eyes and said, "Dad, I want you to meet the woman I'm going to marry." Jason had laughed. Actually laughed. "Mary," he'd said, setting down his whiskey glass. "You're going to marry a waitress? A girl with no family, no education, no prospects." "She's a musician, Dad. She's talented. She's kind. She's black, Matthew." The room had gone silent. Coco's hand had tightened around Matthew's, but she hadn't looked away. Matthew's voice had been steady, but his jaw clenched. "So that's what this is really about." "Don't twist my words," Jason had snapped. "This isn't about race. This is about class. About legacy. About protecting what I've built. You think the board will respect you if you marry some." "Say it," Matthew interrupted, his voice low and dangerous. "Go ahead, Dad. Say what you really think." Jason had stood, towering over them both. "I think you're throwing your life away. I think you're choosing infatuation over responsibility. And I think if you walk out of this house with her, you're no longer my son." Coco had gasped softly, but Matthew hadn't flinched. "Then I guess I'm not your son." "Matthew," Coco had whispered, tears in her eyes. But Matthew had taken her hand and turned toward the door. "If you leave," Jason had said, his voice shaking with rage, "you leave with nothing. No money. No name. No inheritance. You'll be nothing without me." Matthew had paused at the threshold, his back to his father. "Maybe," he'd said quietly, "but I'd rather be nothing with her than everything without her." And then he was gone. Jason had stood in that empty study, his hands trembling, his chest heaving. His wife, Eleanor, had appeared in the doorway, her face streaked with tears. "You've just lost our son," she'd whispered. "He'll come back," Jason had said. "Once he realizes what the real world is like. Once she leaves him for someone with money. He'll come crawling back." Eleanor had shaken her head slowly. "No, Jason. He won't. And when you're old and alone, you'll finally understand what you traded for your pride." She died 6 months later. Cancer. And her last words to him had been a whisper he'd never forgotten. "If you don't make this right with Matthew, you'll die the same way you lived, rich and empty." A knock at the door pulled Jason from his memories. "Mr. Statham." Gregory's voice. "They're here." Jason straightened his tie, composed his face into the mask of cold authority he'd worn for decades, and returned to his desk. "Send them in." The door opened. Jason prepared himself to meet some corporate shark, some ruthless investor who'd come to carve up his life's work. But when the figure stepped into the room, every muscle in Jason's body froze. The man was tall, 6'2", with broad shoulders beneath a perfectly tailored navy suit. His skin was a warm brown, his hair cut close, his beard trimmed with precision. He carried a leather briefcase in one hand and moved with the quiet confidence of someone who'd earned every inch of space he occupied. But it was his eyes that made Jason's cigar slip from his fingers and fall onto the desk. Those eyes. Eleanor's eyes. "Hello, Father," Matthew Statham said, his voice calm, measured, and absolutely devoid of warmth. The room seemed to tilt. Jason gripped the edge of his desk, his knuckles white. "Matthew." "Actually," Matthew said, setting his briefcase on the table and clicking it open, "you can call me M. Carter. That's the name on all the contracts. The name that built SoulLink Holdings from nothing into a $4 billion enterprise. The name that just bought 51% of everything you own." He pulled out a stack of documents and slid them across the desk. "You said I'd never be anything without your name," Matthew continued, his eyes never leaving his father's. "Turns out, I didn't need your name to buy it back." Jason couldn't breathe. His son, the boy he'd disowned, the boy he'd thrown away, stood before him not as a beggar but as a king. And the empire Jason had spent his entire life building? It now belonged to the son he'd called nothing. Sometimes the tables don't just turn, they flip completely. But here's the question we need to ask. Is Matthew here for revenge, or something else? The air in Jason Statham's office felt vacuum-sealed. No sound. No movement. Just two men staring at each other across a mahogany desk that had witnessed 1,000 negotiations, but none like this. Jason's mouth opened, then closed. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for the fallen cigar, his fingers fumbling against the polished wood. The great Jason Statham, a man who'd stared down hostile takeovers, union strikes, and economic recessions without blinking, couldn't find his words. Matthew remained standing, his posture relaxed but his presence filling the room like a quiet storm. He didn't sit, didn't smile, didn't offer his father the courtesy of comfort. "You're—" Jason's voice cracked. He cleared his throat, forcing steel back into it. "Your Soul Link, founder and CEO," Matthew confirmed, his tone professional, almost clinical. "Though I'm surprised you didn't do your research before signing preliminary agreements. You used to be more thorough." The jab landed precisely where Matthew intended. Jason's jaw tightened. "I researched M. Carter," Jason said, recovering some of his composure. "A tech entrepreneur based in Atlanta and Los Angeles. Graduate of MIT," the report said. "Self-made. No family connections." The profile was accurate, Matthew interrupted. "I did graduate from MIT. Got my second degree there after you cut me off. Turns out, when you don't have a trust fund, you qualify for quite a lot of financial aid. And scholarships. I was very motivated." Jason's eyes narrowed. "You changed your name." "I took my mother's maiden name. Carter. Seemed appropriate, since the Statham name was no longer mine to use." Matthew's voice remained even, but something flickered behind his eyes. "You made that very clear." For a moment, Jason saw Eleanor in their son's face, the same quiet strength, the same moral certainty that had always unnerved him because it was something his money couldn't buy or break. "Where have you been?" Jason asked, and for the first time, his voice carried something other than authority. It carried something almost human. 10 years, Matthew. 10 years and not a word. Not a call. Your mother. Before she died she... Don't. The word came out sharp as a blade. Matthew's composure cracked just enough to show the pain beneath. "Don't you dare talk about her. You know what her last words to me were? When I called the hospital and the nurse held the phone to her ear." Jason said nothing. "She said, 'Baby, I'm so proud of you. Don't ever go back to being small just to make small men comfortable.'" Matthew's voice softened. "She died knowing I chose love over money. And she was proud. Can you say the same, Father?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Jason stood slowly, his 6-foot frame still imposing despite his age. He walked to the window, his back to his son, his hands clasped behind him in a posture Matthew remembered from childhood. The stance Jason took when he was trying to maintain control. "I built this empire for you," Jason said quietly. "Everything I did. Every sacrifice. It was supposed to be yours." "No," Matthew replied. "You built it for yourself. For your ego. For the power of saying you started with nothing and became everything. I was just supposed to be the next chapter in your legend. But I was never a son to you, Father. I was an asset. And when I depreciated in value, when I chose a woman you deemed unworthy, you liquidated me." Jason turned sharply. "She was using you." "Her name is Coco," Matthew said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "And you will use it." "Fine. Coco." Jason spat the name like poison. "A waitress with dreams of being a singer. You don't think she saw dollar signs when she looked at you? You don't think she knew exactly what she was doing?" Matthew smiled then, but it wasn't a happy expression. It was the smile of a man who knew something his opponent didn't. "You really want to know what Coco saw when she looked at me?" Matthew asked. "She saw a lonely kid eating breakfast alone in the diner where she worked, reading economic theory at 6 in the morning because his father was already at the office. She saw someone who said, 'Please,' and 'Thank you,' and actually asked her about her day. She saw someone who listened when she talked about her music, who showed up to her performances at hole-in-the-wall venues just to support her." He took a step closer. "She saw me, Father. Not my last name. Not my bank account. Me. And when you threw me out with nothing, she stayed. When we were sleeping in her '98 Honda Civic because we couldn't afford rent, she stayed. When I was washing dishes in the same diner where we met, she stayed. So don't you ever question what she saw in me. Jason's face had gone pale. You were homeless. For 4 months, Matthew said matter-of-factly. Until Coco got a gig that paid enough for us to rent a room in a boarding house. Then we both worked 3 jobs while I applied for scholarships. MIT accepted me with a full ride. Coco worked nights at a recording studio, cleaning at first, then assisting, then actually producing. We built everything from nothing, Father. The same way you claim you did. Except we did it without stepping on people. Without cruelty. Without throwing away the people we loved. Jason slumped back into his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 63 years. I didn't know, he whispered. You didn't ask, Matthew countered. You didn't care. You gave your ultimatum, and when I didn't obey, I ceased to exist to you. Silence filled the space between them again, heavy with 10 years of absence, of words unsaid, of a chasm that wealth couldn't bridge. Finally, Jason looked up, his blue eyes meeting his son's brown ones, Eleanor's eyes. Why are you here, Matthew? If you hate me so much, why not just let my empire collapse? Why buy it? Matthew opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder, sliding it across the desk. Because, Father, I'm not you. I don't destroy for the sake of pride. I build. And right now, Statham Industries employs 17,000 people across 12 countries. Families. People with mortgages and children and dreams. I'm not going to let them suffer because you mismanaged your legacy. Jason opened the folder. Inside were restructuring plans, ethical guidelines, diversity initiatives, employee profit-sharing programs. Everything SoulLink Holdings stood for. Everything Jason had never believed in. You're going to change everything, Jason said, his voice hollow. I'm going to save it, Matthew corrected. There's a difference. But yes, the Statham Industries that emerges from this will not be the empire you built on exploitation and elitism. It will be something better. Jason's hands clenched into fists. And what about me? What's my role in this new vision? Matthew's expression was unreadable. That depends. On what? On whether you're capable of change. On whether you're willing to face what you've done. On whether you're ready to stop being Jason Statham, the untouchable titan, and start being a man who can admit he was wrong. Jason let out a bitter laugh. You want me to grovel? To apologize for protecting my life's work? I want you to be human, Matthew said simply. Something you forgot how to be a long time ago. Before Jason could respond, the door opened. Gregory stepped in, looking flustered. Mr. Statham, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a woman here. She says she's with Mr. Carter. He glanced at Matthew nervously. She says her name is Mrs. Carter, and she's not leaving until... It's fine, Gregory, Matthew said, and for the first time since entering the office, his expression softened. Send her in. Jason's stomach dropped. No. The woman who walked through the door was not the nervous 22-year-old in a yellow dress from his memory. Coco Jones Carter moved like music. Smooth, confident, purposeful. She wore a tailored cream pantsuit that hugged her curves elegantly, her natural hair styled in a crown of curls, her dark skin glowing. Diamond studs sparkled in her ears, and a simple gold band caught the light on her left ring finger. But it was her eyes that struck Jason the hardest. Warm brown eyes that held no hatred, no anger, just a calm, assessing intelligence that made him feel suddenly very small. Jason, she said simply, her voice richer and more controlled than he remembered. It's been a long time. Jason stood automatically, the ingrained manners of his British upbringing forcing him to his feet despite his shock. Miss Jones, he managed. Mrs. Carter, she corrected gently but firmly. I've been Mrs. Carter for 9 years now. Matthew moved to her side, his hand finding the small of her back in a gesture so natural, so intimate, that Jason felt something twist in his chest. They're still together. After everything. After 10 years. After homelessness and struggle and every odd stacked against them, they were still together. "What are you doing here?" Jason asked, his voice hoarse. Coco smiled, and it was a genuinely warm expression, though it didn't quite reach her eyes when she looked at him. "I'm here because my husband has a habit of shouldering burdens alone," she said, glancing at Matthew with obvious affection. "And I promised him a long time ago that whatever we face together." She moved further into the room, her heels clicking softly on the marble floor, and Jason found himself backing up slightly. Not from fear, but from the sheer presence she commanded. This was not the uncertain young woman he'd dismissed as a gold digger. This was a woman who'd been forged in fire and come out diamond strong. "I also wanted to see you for myself," Coco continued, her eyes studying Jason with the same assessment she might give a complex piece of music, "to see if the man who called me a poverty-stricken mistake and told his son I'd ruined the family bloodline had changed at all." Jason flinched. He'd forgotten those exact words, but clearly she hadn't. "And?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Coco tilted her head. "The jury's still out." Matthew's hand squeezed her waist gently. "Coco, you don't have to." "Yes, I do," she said softly, covering his hand with hers. "Because here's the thing, Jason. Matthew is a better man than you ever were. He's kinder. He's more successful in ways that actually matter. And he built everything he has without compromising his soul." She took a breath. "But he's also your son. And whether he admits it or not, part of him still wonders if his father ever loved him. If you were ever proud. If you ever regretted choosing your empire over your child." Jason's throat constricted. Coco stepped closer, her voice dropping to something intimate and devastating. "So I'm going to ask you a question, and I want the truth. Not the corporate mask. Not the British stiff upper lip routine. The truth." She looked directly into his eyes. "Did you ever love him? Even once? Or was Matthew always just a means to an end for you?" The room fell into absolute silence. Matthew stood frozen, his expression carefully neutral, but Jason could see it, the vulnerability beneath. The little boy who'd once looked up at his father with hero worship in his eyes. The son who'd been thrown away. Jason opened his mouth, and for the first time in 10 years, he let the armor crack. "I loved him," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I loved him more than anything. But I didn't know how to show it. I only knew how to build. How to control. How to protect. And when he chose you over everything I'd built for him, I felt like I'd failed. Like nothing I'd done mattered." Tears, actual tears, welled in Jason's eyes. "So I made him hurt the way I hurt. I told myself he'd come back. That it was a lesson he needed to learn. But he never came back, and Eleanor died telling me I'd destroyed the only thing in my life that was worth more than money." He looked at his son, really looked at him, and saw a stranger who shared his blood but none of his cruelty. "I loved you, Matthew," Jason said, his voice raw. "I just loved my pride more. And I've regretted it every single day since." The confession hung in the air, naked and terrible and true. Coco glanced at Matthew, and something passed between them, a wordless conversation that only people who'd survived hell together could have. Finally, Matthew spoke. "I didn't come here for an apology, Father. I came here because I have the power now to either destroy you or rebuild you. And I needed to look you in the eye to decide which one you deserve." Jason held his breath. "But there's something you need to know first," Matthew continued, and he nodded to Coco. She pulled out her phone, tapped the screen, and held it up. On it was a photo of a little girl, maybe 9 or 10 years old, with warm brown skin, bright brown eyes, and a smile that could light up the world. She wore a school uniform and held a violin, her natural hair pulled into 2 puffs. "This is Ava Eleanor Carter," Coco said softly. "Your granddaughter. She's 10 years old. She plays violin, loves science, and wants to be an engineer when she grows up. She's brilliant, kind, and absolutely fearless." Jason's legs buckled. He caught himself on the desk, staring at the photo. I have a granddaughter. You had one for 10 years, Matthew said quietly. "You just didn't know it. Because you threw us away before we could tell you Coco was pregnant." The room spun. Jason looked from the photo to his son to Coco and back again. Does she know about me?" "She knows she has a grandfather," Coco said. "We've never lied to her. She knows you and Matthew had a falling out. She knows we don't have a relationship with you. But we've never taught her to hate you. That's not who we are." Matthew's voice was steady but firm. "So here's what happens next, Father. I'm taking control of Statham Industries. I'm restructuring it. I'm implementing changes you're going to hate. And you're going to have a choice." He stepped forward. "You can fight me, and I'll remove you from every board, every office, every inch of this company. You'll live out your days with your money but without your legacy." He paused. "Or you can stay. Not as CEO, that ship has sailed. But as a consultant. An advisor. Someone who learns to build something that actually helps people instead of just extracting from them. Someone who earns the right to meet his granddaughter." Jason's breath came in short gasps. You'd let me meet her?" "Not yet," Coco interjected. "First, you have to prove you've changed. You have to show us, and more importantly, show yourself that you can be the kind of man a little girl should know. The kind of grandfather she deserves." Jason looked at the photo again, at the little face that carried his bloodline, Eleanor's eyes, and none of his sins. "What do I have to do?" he whispered. Matthew pulled out a contract. "You sign this. You step down as CEO. You accept a position on the advisory board with no controlling power. You attend mandatory workshops on diversity, equity, and ethical leadership. You volunteer 50 hours a year at community centers we'll select. And you attend family therapy, if and when we decide we're ready for that." He slid the contract across the desk. "You want your legacy back, Father? Earn it. Not with money. Not with power. With change." Jason stared at the document, at his son, at the woman his son loved, at the photo of the granddaughter he'd never known. For the first time in his life, Jason Statham realized he had no leverage. No control. No power. Just a choice. Be the man he'd always been, and die alone. Or become someone new. And maybe, just maybe, earn back what he'd thrown away. His hand trembled as he reached for the pen. 3 days later. SoulLink headquarters, Atlanta. The SoulLink building stood in sharp contrast to Statham Tower, where Jason's London fortress had been all steel and glass. Cold, imposing, designed to intimidate. SoulLink's headquarters in Atlanta's tech corridor was warm brick and reclaimed wood, with vertical gardens climbing the exterior walls and solar panels gleaming on the roof. Inside, the open-concept workspace buzzed with creative energy. Engineers collaborated with musicians. Designers worked alongside programmers. The walls were covered in murals celebrating artists from every background, and the company motto was emblazoned in gold letters across the main atrium. "Every voice deserves to be heard." Matthew stood in his corner office, though calling it an office felt wrong. The space had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, but the furniture was comfortable rather than intimidating. A guitar leaned against one wall. Photos of Coco and Ava covered his desk. A small recording booth occupied one corner where he'd sometimes join Coco for impromptu sessions. This was a place built on love, not fear. He was reviewing the Statham Industries transition documents when his phone buzzed. Coco's name lit up the screen. "Coco, he signed it." "Matthew, all of it?" "Coco, every page." "Gregory just sent confirmation. Your father officially stepped down an hour ago. The board meeting is tomorrow." Matthew set down his phone and stared out at the Atlanta skyline. He'd won. After 10 years of building, struggling, and proving himself, he'd done what seemed impossible. He'd taken his father's empire without firing a single shot. So why did he feel so empty? A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. "Come in." Coco entered, and despite everything, despite the heaviness of the moment, Matthew's heart still did that stupid little flip it had been doing since the first day he'd seen her at the Peachtree Diner. She wore jeans and a SoulLink hoodie, her natural hair loose around her shoulders. No makeup. No designer clothes. Just Coco, pure and real and his. "You okay?" she asked, reading him the way she always could. Matthew exhaled. "I don't know. I thought I'd feel triumphant, I guess. Vindicated. But instead, I just keep seeing his face when we showed him Ava's picture." Coco crossed to him, wrapping her arms around his waist from behind, resting her cheek against his back. "That's because you're not him," she said softly. "You don't get joy from other people's pain, even when they deserve it." "Does he deserve it?" Matthew asked. "That's what I keep asking myself. He was cruel. He was bigoted. He threw us away like garbage." But Coco, when he looked at that photo of Ava, he looked broken. "He was broken long before we came along," Coco replied. "We didn't break him, baby. We just held up a mirror." Matthew turned in her arms, looking down at the woman who'd saved him in more ways than one. "Do you think I'm doing the right thing? Giving him a chance to change?" Coco was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing patterns on his chest. "I think," she said finally, "that 10 years ago a rich man's son chose love over money, and it changed both of our lives. I think grace is a language we learned together when the world showed us none. And I think Ava deserves the chance to know her grandfather, but only if he earns it." She looked up at him, her brown eyes serious. "But Matthew, you need to be prepared for the possibility that he won't change. That this is just another negotiation to him. That he'll sign whatever you want and then go right back to being who he's always been." "I know," Matthew said. "That's what scares me. What if I'm just setting myself up to be disappointed again?" "Then you'll survive it," Coco said firmly. "Like you survived everything else. But you'll survive it knowing you gave him a chance. That you were the bigger man. That you broke the cycle instead of perpetuating it." Before Matthew could respond, his office door burst open. Marcus Chen, SolLink's chief technology officer and Matthew's closest friend since their MIT days, stood in the doorway, his usually calm demeanor replaced by something that looked like panic. "We have a problem," Marcus said, his tablet clutched in his hand. Matthew straightened. "What kind of problem?" Marcus crossed the room and pulled up a news article on the wall screen. The headline made Matthew's blood run cold. "Statham heir stages hostile takeover. Son returns after decade to strip father of empire in revenge plot." Below it was a photo, Matthew and Jason in the office 3 days ago, clearly taken through the window by a telephoto lens. The image was damning. Matthew standing over his father, Jason's face a mask of devastation. "It gets worse," Marcus said, scrolling down. The article, written by a financial journalist named Rebecca Thornton, painted Matthew as a vindictive son who'd spent a decade plotting revenge against his father. It quoted anonymous sources, claiming the disownment had been justified because Matthew had been involved in questionable activities and had brought shame to the family. It portrayed Coco as a manipulative woman who'd seduced Matthew for his money, conveniently omitting that Matthew had been disowned when they met. Worst of all, it claimed SolLink's acquisition was fraudulent, suggesting Matthew had used dubious connections and possibly illegal financial maneuvers to destroy his father's company. Matthew's jaw clenched. Who wrote this? Who are these anonymous sources? "I'm already tracing it," Marcus said, his fingers flying across his tablet. "But Matt, this is on every major financial news site. It's trending on social media. Our stock dropped 3 points in the last hour." Coco's hand found Matthew's. "This is a hit piece. Someone's trying to turn public opinion against you before you can take control of Statham Industries." The board, Matthew realized. The old guard. They don't want me in control because they know I'll expose how they've been operating. His phone began buzzing incessantly. Texts, calls, emails, all from investors, partners, press wanting statements. And then one call that made his stomach drop. Ava's school. He answered immediately. "This is Matthew Carter." "Mr. Carter, this is Principal Morrison. I'm calling because there's been an incident involving Ava." Matthew's world tilted. "What happened? Is she hurt?" "She's physically fine, but there was an altercation during lunch. Some older students showed her an article about you, the one making the rounds online, and made some very inappropriate comments. Ava confronted them and, well, she threw a lunch tray. Despite everything, Matthew felt a flash of pride. That was his daughter. Is she in trouble? She's in my office now. The other students have been disciplined for bullying, but Mr. Carter, I think you should come get her. She's very upset. I'm on my way. He hung up and looked at Coco, who'd heard everything. I'll get the car, she said immediately. 20 minutes later, Oak Ridge Academy. Ava sat in Principal Morrison's office, her school uniform rumpled, her two-puff ponytails slightly askew, her brown eyes red from crying but her chin held high. When Matthew and Coco walked in, she launched herself at them. They said you were a criminal. Ava sobbed into Matthew's chest. They said Mommy only married you for money and that you stole from your own father and that we're all liars. Matthew's heart shattered. He knelt down, cupping his daughter's face gently. Ava, baby, look at me. She did, her eyes so much like Eleanor's, so full of hurt and confusion. None of that is true, Matthew said firmly. Not one word. Someone is trying to hurt our family by lying about us. But lies don't become truth just because people repeat them. But everyone at school saw it, Ava whispered. They were all looking at their phones and laughing and pointing at me. Coco knelt beside them, her hand on Ava's back. Baby girl, do you know what your name means? Ava sniffled. You named me after Grandma Eleanor. That's right, Coco said. Your grandmother was the strongest, kindest woman your father ever knew. And when people tried to make her small, she stood tall. Just like you did today. But I threw a tray at Tyler Henderson, Ava said miserably. Matthew bit back a smile. Was it a full tray? Daddy, Coco warned, but her eyes were dancing. It had spaghetti on it, Ava admitted. And he said Mommy was a gold digger and that you were white trash pretending to be rich. Matthew's amusement vanished. He looked at Principal Morrison, who had the grace to look uncomfortable. Tyler Henderson is being suspended for 3 days, the principal said quickly. And his parents will be contacted about the racist language. We have a zero-tolerance policy. Good, Matthew said coldly. Then, to Ava. You know what, baby girl? I'm proud of you for standing up for our family. But next time, use your words instead of spaghetti, okay? Ava managed a small smile. Okay, Daddy. Matthew stood, lifting Ava into his arms even though she was really getting too big for it. She wrapped her legs around his waist and buried her face in his neck. Mr. and Mrs. Carter, Principal Morrison said carefully. Given the situation, would you like us to make a statement to the other parents? To clarify. No, Matthew said firmly. You'll do nothing. This is our family's business, and we'll handle it. He looked at Coco, and she nodded. But, Coco added, her voice pleasant but carrying an edge that made the principal shift uncomfortably, if we hear of one more student harassing our daughter about this, or any other student being bullied for their family situation, we'll be having a very different conversation about this school's commitment to diversity and inclusion. Of course, Mrs. Carter. Absolutely. As they walked out of the school with Ava between them, each holding one of her hands, Matthew felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just about him and Jason anymore. This was about protecting his family. About making sure Ava never felt the shame and rejection he'd felt. About proving that love and integrity could win against money and lies. They reached the car, and Matthew buckled Ava into the back seat. She looked up at him with those serious eyes. Daddy, are you really buying Grandpa Jason's company? Matthew paused. They'd told Ava about Jason in age-appropriate terms, that Daddy had a father who'd made some mistakes and that they didn't see him. But they'd never gone into detail. Yes, baby girl. I am. Is it because you're mad at him? For being mean to you and Mommy? Matthew glanced at Coco, who gave him an encouraging nod. Partly, Matthew admitted, sitting on the edge of the car so he was at Ava's eye level. But mostly because I want to make sure the people who work for his company are treated fairly. And because I want to show him that the way he treated people was wrong. Are you going to be mean back to him? God, children could cut right to the heart of things. I don't want to be, Matthew said honestly. I want to be better than that. Ava thought about this seriously. Mommy says being the bigger person is hard. Your mommy is very wise. She also says that grace is what we give people even when they don't deserve it, because that's what love does. Matthew felt his throat tighten. She says that, does she? Ava nodded. So maybe you should give Grandpa Jason some grace. But not too much. Not until he says sorry for being mean. Matthew pulled his daughter into a hug, marveling at the wisdom in this 10-year-old child. You're pretty smart, you know that? I get it from you and Mommy, Ava said matter-of-factly. And maybe from Grandma Eleanor. Even though I never met her. You would have loved her, Matthew whispered. And she would have loved you so much. When they got home to their house in Virginia Highlands, a beautiful but not ostentatious home they'd bought 3 years ago, Matthew's phone was still exploding with notifications. Coco took Ava upstairs to do homework, leaving Matthew to deal with the crisis. He called Marcus. Tell me you found something. Oh, I found something, Marcus said, and his voice carried a dark satisfaction. The article. It was fed to Rebecca Thornton by a PR firm. And that PR firm. It's on retainer for Statham Industries. Specifically for 3 board members, Richard Ashworth, Patricia Crenshaw, and David Liu. The old guard, Matthew said. The ones who've been embezzling through shell companies for the past 5 years. Exactly. They know you've seen the forensic audits. They know the second you take control, they're finished. So they're trying to destroy your reputation first, make it look like you're the corrupt one. Matthew's mind raced. Can we prove it? I've got email chains, payment records, and a very nervous junior associate at the PR firm who's willing to talk if we guarantee immunity. Matt, we've got them dead to rights. Then we go public, Matthew said. We release everything. The embezzlement. The corruption. The fact that they're trying to frame me to cover their own crimes. That'll tank Statham Industries' stock even further, Marcus warned. And it'll make the acquisition messy, eh? I don't care, Matthew said. I'm not going to let them destroy my family's reputation to save themselves. There's one more thing, Marcus said carefully. Jason Statham's name is on some of these documents. Not many, but enough that it looks like he at least knew what was happening. If we release this, we expose him too. Matthew was silent. This was it. The moment where he could destroy his father completely. Not just take his company, but ruin his reputation, potentially land him in legal trouble, ensure that Jason Statham's name became synonymous with corruption and fraud. Everything the old Matthew would have wanted. But then he thought of Ava's words. Maybe you should give Grandpa Jason some grace. And Coco's. If you burn down everything he built, you become him. And his mother's from 10 years ago. Don't ever go back to being small just to make small men comfortable. Matthew. Marcus prompted. What do you want to do? Matthew took a deep breath. I want you to compile 2 reports. One that includes everything, including Jason's potential involvement, and one that focuses solely on the board members and leaves Jason out of it. Why 2 reports? Because I'm going to give my father a choice, Matthew said. He can help me expose the board and clean up his own company, proving he actually wants to change. Or he can protect them and prove he's still the same man he always was. And if he chooses wrong? Then I release the full report, and he goes down with the ship he captained. Marcus was quiet for a moment. You're giving him a lot of rope, Matt. He might hang you with it. Or he might finally do the right thing, Matthew countered. Either way, I'll know who he really is. After hanging up, Matthew sat in his home office, a small room filled with Ava's artwork and photos of their family's journey from poverty to success, and pulled up his contact list. His finger hovered over a number he'd created 3 days ago but hadn't used yet. Jason Statham, mobile. His father had provided it as part of the agreement, a way for Matthew to reach him during the transition. Matthew had sworn he'd never use it. But now, looking at the article that threatened his family, thinking of his daughter crying because of lies spread about people she loved, he realized something. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about truth. And it was about giving Jason one final chance to choose the kind of man he wanted to be. Matthew pressed dial. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then, Matthew. Jason's voice, uncertain, almost afraid. "We need to talk," Matthew said. "Tomorrow morning. 6 a.m. The Peachtree Diner on West Peachtree Street." That's where you met her. Coco. Yes. And it's where you're going to decide whether you want to be part of the solution or part of the problem. I don't understand. You will, Matthew said. 6 a.m., Father. Don't be late. And come alone. He hung up before Jason could respond. At the Peachtree Diner, Atlanta. The diner hadn't changed much in 10 years. Same red vinyl booths. Same black and white checkered floor. Same smell of coffee and bacon grease that somehow felt like home. The neon sign outside flickered intermittently, casting pink light across the empty parking lot in the pre-dawn darkness. Matthew sat in the corner booth, the same one where he'd first seen Coco all those years ago. She'd been refilling coffee for the early morning crowd, humming softly to herself, and when she turned to take his order, her smile had literally stolen his breath. He'd come back every morning for 2 weeks before he'd finally worked up the courage to ask her name. Now he sat in that same booth, 2 cups of coffee on the table, watching the door. At 5:58, a Blacktown car pulled into the parking lot. Jason Statham emerged, and Matthew almost didn't recognize him. Gone was the crisp designer suit. Instead, his father wore dark slacks and a simple button-down shirt. His silver hair, usually perfectly styled, looked slightly disheveled. He moved slowly, like a man who'd aged a decade in 3 days. Jason paused at the diner entrance, his hand on the door, visible through the glass. For a moment, Matthew thought he might turn around and leave. But then Jason pushed the door open, the bell above it chiming. Their eyes met across the empty diner. Jason crossed to the booth and slid in across from Matthew, his movements stiff, uncertain. This was a man out of his element, stripped of the trappings that had always defined him. "You came," Matthew said. "You're my son," Jason replied quietly. "Of course I came." An awkward silence settled between them. Matthew pushed one of the coffee cups across the table. "Black, 2 sugars. That's still how you take it, right?" Jason looked surprised that Matthew remembered. "Yes. Thank you." He wrapped his hands around the cup but didn't drink. "This place," Jason said, looking around. "This is where it all started." "Where what started?" "Where I lost you." Jason's voice was barely above a whisper. "You met her here, didn't you?" "Coco." "I met my wife here," Matthew corrected, emphasizing the word. "My partner. The mother of my child." "Yes." Jason flinched but nodded. "I deserved that." The diner door opened again, and both men looked up. Coco walked in, and Matthew felt that same flutter in his chest he always did. She wore jeans, boots, and a leather jacket, her natural hair pulled back in a high puff. She carried a folder under her arm. Jason started to stand, that ingrained politeness again, but Coco waved him back down. "Don't," she said, not unkindly. "We're not doing formal here. This isn't a board meeting." She slid in next to Matthew, and he felt the warmth of her presence immediately. She set the folder on the table but didn't open it. "Mr. Statham," she said, her voice neutral. "Mrs. Carter," Jason replied, and this time he got it right without being corrected. Coco studied him for a long moment. "You look terrible." Jason let out a surprised bark of laughter that sounded rusty, like he hadn't laughed in years. "I feel terrible." "Good," Coco said bluntly. "You should." The honesty seemed to steady Jason somehow. He straightened slightly, meeting her eyes. "I owe you an apology," he said. "For the things I said to you 10 years ago. For the things I called you. For treating you like you were less than human because of your skin color and your bank account balance." Coco's expression didn't soften. "I don't want your apology yet." Jason blinked. "I don't understand." "Apologies are words," Coco said. "And words are cheap. You're a businessman, Jason. You know the difference between promises and performance. So no, I don't want your apology right now. I want your actions. Then maybe your apology will mean something. Matthew felt a surge of love and pride. This woman. God, this woman. Jason swallowed hard and nodded. Fair enough. Matthew opened the folder Coco had brought and pulled out 2 sets of documents, sliding them across the table. What are these? Jason asked. The reason I called you here, Matthew said. Yesterday, a hit piece was published about me. About Coco. About our family. It painted me as a vindictive son staging a hostile takeover and suggested I used illegal means to acquire your company. Jason's face darkened. I saw it. I've had my lawyers drafting a statement to refute. It was commissioned by your board of directors, Matthew interrupted. Specifically, Richard Ashworth, Patricia Crenshaw, and David Liu. They hired a PR firm to destroy my reputation before I could take control of the company. Jason's mouth fell open. That's impossible. Richard has been with me for 20 years. Patricia has been embezzling funds through shell companies for 5 years, Coco said, flipping open the first document. Along with the others. We have forensic accounting reports, email chains, offshore account records. They've stolen approximately $47 million from Statham Industries. Jason's hand trembled as he reached for the documents. His face went ashen as he scanned the pages. This can't be, he whispered. I trusted them. They were my closest advisors. They were stealing from you, Matthew said. And when I ran preliminary audits as part of the acquisition due diligence, I found the discrepancies. They knew I'd found them. So they tried to discredit me first, make it look like I was the criminal so nobody would believe me when I exposed them. Jason looked like he might be sick. How long have you known? About a week. And you didn't tell me? You weren't speaking to me, Matthew reminded him quietly. We hadn't seen each other in 10 years. Why would I tell you anything? The truth of that statement hit Jason visibly. He slumped back in the booth. What do I do? That's why we're here, Matthew said, sliding the second document across. You have a choice to make. Jason looked at the second folder warily. What kind of choice? This folder contains a full report on the embezzlement. Names, amounts, methods, everything. If we release it, the board members go down. They'll be arrested, prosecuted, probably serve significant prison time. Then release it, Jason said immediately. If they stole from my company. Your name is in some of these documents, Coco interrupted. The blood drained from Jason's face. What? You signed off on several of the shell company formations, Matthew explained. Whether you knew what they were being used for or not, your signature is on the paperwork. And there are emails where you approved large fund transfers that went to these accounts. I didn't know, Jason said desperately. You have to believe me. They brought me documents to sign, told me they were standard investment vehicles, diversification strategies. We believe you, Matthew said, and Jason's head snapped up in surprise. You do. The pattern of deception is clear, Coco said. They were careful to keep you just informed enough to make it look like you knew, but not informed enough that you'd actually understand what was happening. It's a classic embezzlement strategy. Jason's hands were shaking. So what does this mean for me? Matthew leaned forward. It means you have a choice, Father. We have 2 versions of this report. One that includes your potential involvement and one that focuses solely on the board members. We can prove they manipulated you, but it would require you to testify against them. To admit you were negligent in your oversight. To expose the inner workings of Statham Industries publicly. It would humiliate you, Coco added. Make you look either criminally complicit or incompetent. Either way, your reputation takes a massive hit. Jason was silent, his jaw working. Or, he finally asked. Or you help us, Matthew said. You work with our legal team. You provide testimony about how they operated, what they told you, how they gained your trust. You become part of the solution instead of part of the problem. And when we release the report, We release the version that shows you as a victim of their scheme, not a co-conspirator. You'd protect me? Jason's voice cracked. After everything I've done to you? I'd protect the truth, Matthew corrected. And the truth is that you were an arrogant, cruel man who destroyed his own family over pride and prejudice. But that doesn't make you a thief. I won't let them frame you for crimes you didn't commit, even if I'd love to see you face consequences for the ones you did. Coco's hand found Matthew's under the table, squeezing gently. Jason stared at his son, tears forming in his eyes. Why would you do this for me? Because my daughter asked me to give you grace, Matthew said simply. And because my wife taught me that revenge doesn't heal wounds, it just makes new ones. But mostly because I need to know if you're capable of change. If you're capable of doing the right thing even when it's hard. He locked eyes with his father. So here's your choice, father. You can help us expose them, take responsibility for your negligence, and start the hard work of becoming a better man. Or you can try to protect your reputation, deny everything, and I release the full report that implicates you along with them. That's not really a choice, Jason said. Of course it is, Coco countered. You can choose truth and humility, or you can choose pride and self-preservation. It's the same choice you made 10 years ago when Matthew brought me to meet you. You chose wrong then. The question is, what will you choose now? The diner was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic beginning to pick up as dawn approached. Jason looked down at the documents, at the evidence of betrayal by people he'd trusted, at the crossroads his life had become. If I help you, he said slowly, if I testify against them, I'll be finished in the business world. Nobody will trust me again. I'll be seen as the fool who couldn't even control his own board. Probably, Matthew agreed. Your empire, your reputation, everything you built will be tarnished. Maybe permanently. Jason closed his eyes. But those 17,000 employees you mentioned, they keep their jobs? That's the plan. We restructure, clean house at the top, implement new ethics protocols, and move forward. And Ava. Jason's voice was barely audible. Your daughter. My granddaughter. If I do this, if I do the right thing, would I ever get to meet her? Coco and Matthew exchanged a look. Not immediately, Coco said carefully. But it would be a start. A foundation we could build on. Jason opened his eyes, and there was something different in them now. Something Matthew had never seen before. Resignation, maybe. Or perhaps the first glimmer of actual humility. I've spent my entire life building an empire, Jason said quietly. 63 years of accumulating power and wealth and influence. And you know what I realized these past 3 days. He looked directly at Matthew. I can't remember the last time anyone looked at me with love. With genuine affection. Everyone wants something from me. Everyone fears me or flatters me or tries to manipulate me. But nobody just loves me. His voice broke. Your mother did. Once. Before I drove her away with my coldness. And you did when you were a boy. Before I taught you that nothing mattered except winning. He wiped his eyes roughly. I have everything a man could want, and I am utterly, completely alone. Matthew felt his own throat tighten. So yes, Jason said, straightening his shoulders. I'll help you. I'll testify. I'll face whatever consequences come. Because maybe, just maybe, if I do the right thing for once in my miserable life, someday I'll get to look into my granddaughter's eyes and not feel ashamed. Coco reached across the table and, to everyone's surprise, placed her hand over Jason's. That's the first honest thing I've ever heard you say, she said softly. Jason looked at her hand on his, the hand of the woman he'd called terrible things, the woman whose love for his son he'd dismissed as opportunism, and he started to cry. Not the restrained tears of before, but actual sobs that shook his shoulders. I'm so sorry, he gasped. God, I'm so sorry. For all of it. For the things I said. For the hatred. For stealing 10 years from my son because I was too proud to admit I was wrong. For missing my wife's last years because she couldn't stand to look at me anymore. For never knowing my granddaughter. For all of it. Matthew felt something crack open in his chest. Something he'd kept locked tight for a decade. He slid out of the booth and, after a moment's hesitation, sat down next to his father. Jason looked at him in shock as Matthew put a tentative arm around his shoulders. "We're not okay yet," Matthew said firmly. "We're not even close to okay. You have years of work to do. Years of proving yourself. But this is a start." Jason leaned into his son's embrace and wept like a child. Across the table, Coco wiped her own eyes, watching the beginning of something that looked almost like healing. 3 hours later, SoulLink headquarters, conference room. The legal team had assembled quickly. Matthew's lead attorney, Sarah Chen, a brilliant woman who'd helped structure the SoulLink acquisition, sat at the head of the table with her associates. Marcus was there with his tech team, ready to present the digital evidence. And Jason sat next to Matthew, looking small and uncertain in a way that would have been unthinkable a week ago. "Mr. Statham," Sarah began, "we need to go through every interaction you had with the board members regarding these shell companies. Every conversation, every document, every approval. This is going to be uncomfortable, but it's necessary." Jason nodded. "I understand. Where do we start?" For the next 4 hours, they dissected years of Jason's business dealings. With each revelation, each moment where he'd signed something without understanding it, trusted someone who was betraying him, the picture became clearer. Jason Statham hadn't been a criminal. He'd been a mark. "They played you perfectly," Marcus said, almost admiringly, as he showed an email chain where Patricia Crenshaw had manipulated Jason into approving a transfer by making it seem like a time-sensitive investment opportunity. "They knew you made snap decisions. They knew you trusted your inner circle. They weaponized your management style against you." Jason looked ill. "I was arrogant. I thought I was too smart to be fooled." "Pride comes before the fall," Sarah said, not unkindly. "But the good news is that your testimony, combined with our forensic evidence, makes an airtight case against them. They're finished. When do we release the report?" Matthew asked. "I'd recommend tomorrow morning," Sarah said. "We coordinate with the SEC, the FBI, and major media outlets simultaneously. We control the narrative before they can spin it." "And my statement?" Jason asked. Sarah slid a document across to him. "We've drafted something. It admits your negligence, expresses your betrayal, and commits to full cooperation with authorities. It's humble without being self-flagellating." Jason read it slowly, his finger tracing the words. "This will destroy everything I've built," he said quietly. "No," Matthew corrected. "It will destroy everything you built on sand. What we build next, if you commit to actual change, that will be built on rock." Jason looked at his son. "And you trust me to be part of that?" "Trust is earned," Coco said from the doorway. Nobody had heard her come in. She held a tablet in her hand. "And right now, Jason, you're earning it. Slowly. But earning it." She crossed to the table and set down the tablet. On it was a news alert. "Breaking. Statham Industries board members under federal investigation for embezzlement and fraud." "It leaked," Marcus said, alarmed. "Not leaked," Coco said. "Richard Ashworth just tried to flee the country. TSA flagged him at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport with $2 million in cash and a one-way ticket to the Cayman Islands. The feds arrested him an hour ago." "Damn," Sarah breathed. "So much for controlling the narrative." Matthew's phone exploded with notifications. News outlets. Investors. Board members. And then one call that made his blood run cold. Oak Ridge Academy. Principal Morrison. He answered. "This is Matthew." "Mr. Carter, I'm so sorry to disturb you, but we have a situation. There are news vans outside the school. Reporters are trying to interview parents at pickup. And Ava. Some of the children have been showing her the news alerts about the arrests." Matthew's jaw clenched. "Is she safe?" "She's in my office with her teacher. She's not in danger, but Mr. Carter, she's asking questions we don't have answers for. I think you need to come get her. I'm on my way." He hung up and looked at Coco, who was already grabbing her jacket. "I heard," she said. Let's go. Matthew turned to Jason, who sat frozen at the table, clearly understanding that his actions, past and present, were now affecting his granddaughter. Stay here, Matthew said. Work with Sarah. Give your statement. Do the right thing. Matthew, Jason started. Do the right thing, Matthew repeated firmly. That's all you can do now. 30 minutes later, Oak Ridge Academy. The scene outside the school was chaos. 3 news vans lined the street, reporters with microphones trying to catch parents as they arrived for early pickup. Cameras swiveled toward Matthew and Coco's car as they pulled up. Mr. Carter, is it true your father's company was involved in a massive fraud scheme? Mrs. Carter, did you know about the embezzlement? How does it feel to be taking over a corrupt empire? Matthew ignored them all, his hand protective on Coco's back as they pushed through to the entrance. The school security guard, a kind older man named Bernard, blocked the reporters from following. They've been here for an hour, Bernard said quietly. I'm sorry, Mr. Carter. We've called the police to move them off school property. Thank you, Bernard. Inside Principal Morrison's office, Ava sat in a chair that was too big for her, her backpack clutched in her lap, her eyes red but dry. Her teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, sat beside her, a protective hand on her shoulder. When Ava saw her parents, she didn't run to them like she had yesterday. Instead, she just looked at them with an expression far too old for her 10 years. Is Grandpa Jason a criminal? She asked directly. Matthew and Coco exchanged a glance. They'd always promised to be honest with their daughter, age appropriately. Matthew knelt in front of her. No, baby girl. Grandpa Jason was stolen from by people he trusted, but he's helping us catch the people who did it. The news said he might go to jail. The news is wrong, Coco said firmly. Sometimes reporters don't wait to get all the facts before they publish stories. What matters is the truth. What is the truth? Ava asked, her voice small. Matthew took a deep breath. The truth is complicated, sweetheart. Grandpa Jason made a lot of mistakes in his life. He was mean to me and your mom when we first met. He said terrible things and did terrible things because he cared more about money and power than about people. Ava's brow furrowed. Then why are you helping him? Because people can change, Matthew said. And because even when someone has hurt you, you can choose to help them become better instead of punishing them. That's what grace means. But the kids at school said you're only helping him so you can steal his company, Ava whispered. They said you're just like him. They said our whole family is bad. Coco's hand tightened on Matthew's shoulder, her nails digging in slightly, the only sign of her rage. Ava Eleanor Carter, Coco said, moving to kneel beside Matthew so they were both at their daughter's eye level. Look at me. Ava did, her brown eyes meeting her mother's. You come from a long line of strong people, Coco said. Your grandma Eleanor, who stood up to powerful men and never backed down. Your great-grandma Jones, who marched in civil rights protests when it could get you killed. Your daddy, who chose love over money and built everything we have from nothing. She cupped Ava's face gently. And me, a girl from the West End who was told she'd never be anything but a waitress, who fought her way into the music industry, who stood beside your father when the whole world told us we were crazy. Coco's voice was fierce. We are not bad people, baby. We are people who do hard things, who choose what's right over what's easy, who build instead of destroy. Then why is everyone being so mean? Ava's voice cracked. Because change scares people, Matthew said. Because when you stand up and do something different, something that challenges the way things have always been, people who benefit from the old way get angry. But you know what? What? We've been here before, Matthew said. When I chose to marry your mom, people said terrible things. When we started SoulLink, people said we'd fail. When we created programs to help poor kids learn music and technology, people said it was a waste of money. But we did it anyway. And we'll get through this too. Together. Ava was quiet for a long moment. Then, I want to meet him. Matthew blinked. What? Grandpa Jason, Ava said, her voice steadier now. If he's trying to change, if he's trying to be better, I want to meet him. Because how can I know if people can really change if I don't see it? Matthew felt like the wind had been knocked out of him. He looked at Coco, who looked equally stunned. "Baby girl," Coco said carefully. That's a very mature thought. But you don't have to do that. Not yet. Not until we're sure. I want to, Ava insisted. You said grace is what we give people even when they don't deserve it. So I want to give him grace. But I want to see if he takes it or throws it away. Matthew pulled his daughter into his arms, overwhelmed by this fierce, compassionate, brilliant child they'd created. "Okay," he whispered into her hair. "Okay. But on our terms. When we're ready. And if at any point you change your mind, I can change it back," Ava finished. "I know, Daddy. You always say that. I have agency." She pronounced the word carefully, proudly, a concept they'd been teaching her since she was old enough to understand. Principal Morrison, who'd been silent this whole time, cleared her throat. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter, given the media situation, we'd be happy to arrange alternative pickup and drop-off for Ava until this settles down. Perhaps through the back-end trance." "We'd appreciate that," Matthew said. "And," Morrison continued, "I want you to know that the students who were harassing Ava will be facing consequences. We're also planning an assembly on media literacy and not believing everything we read online." "Thank you," Coco said. "We appreciate you protecting our daughter." As they left through the back entrance, avoiding the media circus out front, Matthew's phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Chen. "Sarah." Jason gave his statement. "It's going live in 15 minutes. You should probably watch it with Coco. It's emotional." "Matthew, how bad?" "Sarah, not bad. Actually, kind of beautiful." He took full responsibility for his negligence and his failures as a leader and as a father. Didn't pull any punches. The man basically performed corporate seppuku on live television. 20 minutes later. Carter family home. They sat in the living room, Matthew, Coco, and Ava between them on the couch, watching Jason's press conference on the large screen. Jason stood behind a podium at Statham Tower, looking older and smaller than Matthew had ever seen him. No expensive suit this time. Just a simple dark blazer and an open-collar shirt. No imperial bearing. Just a broken man trying to piece together some dignity. "My name is Jason Statham," he began, his British accent somehow more pronounced, "and I've been a fool." The reporters in the room stirred, surprised by the opening. "For 40 years, I built Statham Industries on a foundation of ambition, control, and the belief that power justified any action. I was ruthless in business, cold in my personal life, and absolutely convinced that my success proved I was right about everything." He paused, his hands gripping the podium. "I was wrong. 3 days ago my son, whom I disowned 10 years ago for falling in love with a woman I deemed beneath our family status, came to my office. Matthew Statham, who now goes by Matthew Carter, had built a $4 billion company from nothing. The same son I'd told would never amount to anything without my name had become more successful, more ethical, and more respected than I had ever been. The room was dead silent. And he didn't come to gloat. He came to save the 17,000 employees of my company from my failures. Because while I was busy being an empire, I was blind to the fact that my most trusted advisors were stealing from me. From us. From the thousands of people who depended on Statham Industries for their livelihoods." Jason pulled out papers, the evidence. Richard Ashworth, Patricia Crenshaw, and David Liu embezzled approximately $47 million over 5 years. They did it right under my nose. They manipulated me, yes, but I let myself be manipulated because I was arrogant. Because I surrounded myself with yes men and anyone who challenged me was removed. Because I built a culture of fear instead of accountability. He looked directly into the camera. "I take full responsibility for creating the environment where this could happen. I was negligent. I was prideful. And when my own son tried to show me a better way of doing business, when he chose love and integrity over money and status, I punished him for it." Matthew felt Coco's hand find his. 10 years ago, Jason continued, his voice breaking slightly, "I told my son he was nothing without my name. I disowned him for falling in love with Coco Jones, a brilliant, talented woman I dismissed because of her race and her economic status. I called her terrible things. I treated them both with cruelty that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with my own prejudice and pride. Tears were streaming down Jason's face now. I was wrong. About all of it. Matthew built everything he has through hard work, innovation, and treating people with dignity. He and his wife created a company that represents everything I claim to value but never actually practiced. Excellence, integrity, and opportunity. He wiped his eyes. My son could have destroyed me. He had every right to. Instead, he gave me a choice. Change or be left behind. And for the first time in my life, I'm choosing to change. Jason straightened slightly. Effective immediately, I am stepping down from all leadership positions at Statham Industries. Control of the company now rests with Matthew Carter and SoulLink Holdings. I will cooperate fully with federal investigations into the embezzlement. I will testify against the individuals who betrayed this company. And I will spend however long it takes working to become the kind of man my son already is. The kind of man who builds people up instead of tearing them down. He paused, then added softly, Matthew, Coco, if you're watching this, thank you. Thank you for showing me that grace doesn't mean accepting bad behavior. It means giving someone the opportunity to become better. I don't deserve your forgiveness yet. I haven't earned it. But I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying. The press conference erupted into questions, but Jason simply walked away from the podium, leaving his attorney to handle the follow-up. The screen went back to the news anchors, already analyzing and dissecting every word, but Matthew had stopped listening. Ava was crying silently, tears streaming down her face. Baby girl. Coco said, concerned. What's wrong? He's sad, Ava whispered. Grandpa Jason is so sad. He lost everything because he was mean, and now he's all alone and he's so sad. Matthew pulled his daughter close. He made choices that led to this, sweetheart. I know, Ava said. But that doesn't mean it doesn't hurt him. Being wrong really hurts. Out of the mouths of babes. Matthew's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Unknown. This is your father. I got a new phone. The press was calling the old one constantly. I just wanted to say thank you for watching. And to tell you I meant every word. I love you, son. I always have. I just forgot how to show it. Dad. Matthew stared at the text for a long time. Coco leaned over to read it, then looked at her husband. What are you going to do? Matthew looked at his daughter. This brave, compassionate child who'd inherited the best of both her parents and none of their trauma. Then at his wife, the woman who'd stood by him through homelessness and struggle and triumph. Then at the phone. He typed, Matthew, we have a long way to go. But this is a start. SoulLink headquarters, tomorrow, 9 a.m. We have work to do. He sent it. A moment later. Dad, I'll be there. Thank you for the chance. That evening, Carter family home, dinner. They were eating Coco's famous mac and cheese, a recipe she'd perfected during their poorest days when it was all they could afford. When the doorbell rang, Matthew frowned. We're not expecting anyone. He checked the security camera feed and froze. Standing on their doorstep, looking uncertain and out of place, was Jason. He held a small bag in one hand and looked like he might bolt at any second. It's your father, Matthew said to Coco. She set down her fork. Did you invite him? No. They looked at each other, then at Ava, who'd stopped eating and was watching them with wide eyes. I want to see him, Ava said quietly. Please. Matthew's heart hammered. This was too soon. Too fast. They needed more time, more proof, more. Coco placed her hand over his. Let her decide, she whispered. We said she had agency. Let her use it. Matthew took a deep breath and opened the door. Jason stood there, and up close, Matthew could see his father had been crying. His eyes were red, his face drawn. I'm sorry, Jason said immediately. I know I shouldn't have come unannounced. I was driving and I just... I found myself here. I can leave. I'll leave. I just wanted to. Grandpa Jason. Ava's voice, small and clear, cut through Jason's rambling. Jason's eyes widened as he looked past Matthew to see Ava standing in the hallway, her natural hair in 2 braids, wearing pajamas with planets on them. He dropped to his knees right there on the doorstep. Ava, he breathed. You're real. You're actually real. Of course I'm real, Ava said, moving closer despite Coco's restraining hand. Did you think I was made up? No, seeing you in person is different than a photograph. Jason's voice was thick with emotion. You're so beautiful. You have your grandmother's eyes. Everyone says that, Ava said. She tilted her head, studying him with that direct, unnerving gaze children had. You made my daddy cry a lot, didn't you? Jason flinched. Yes, I did. And you were mean to my mom because of her skin color. Yes. That's racist. Yes, it was. Ava considered this. Are you still racist? The question hung in the air. Jason looked at this fierce, brilliant child, his granddaughter, and seemed to understand that she would accept nothing less than complete honesty. I'm trying not to be, he said carefully. I was raised with certain beliefs, certain prejudices, and I never questioned them. I never thought about how they hurt people. But your parents, they've shown me how wrong I was. I'm learning. I'm trying to do better. But I know that doesn't erase what I did. Ava nodded slowly. Mommy says that admitting you're wrong is the first step to being better. Your mother is very wise. I know. Ava took another step closer. What's in the bag? Jason looked down at the small bag he was holding like he'd forgotten it was there. I brought you something, he said. But I don't know if I have the right to give it to you. That's up to your parents. He looked at Matthew and Coco, his eyes pleading. Matthew wanted to say no, wanted to slam the door and protect his daughter from the possibility of disappointment. But Coco's hand on his arm stopped him. What is it? Coco asked. Jason opened the bag and pulled out a small, worn violin case. It was clearly old, the leather scuffed and faded, but well-maintained. This was your grandmother's, Jason said softly, looking at Ava. Eleanor played violin from the time she was 7 years old. She was extraordinary. She could have gone professional, but she chose to teach music to underprivileged children instead. He ran his hand over the case. When she got sick, she made me promise I'd give this to her first grandchild. She said music was the language of the soul, and she wanted her legacy to be passed down through sound, not money. Jason's voice cracked. I forgot about it. Or maybe I didn't forget. Maybe I just couldn't bear to look at it because it reminded me of everything I'd lost. But after I saw your picture, after I learned you played violin, I went to the storage room where I'd locked away all of Eleanor's things and I found it. He held the case out to Ava. I don't know if I have the right to give this to you. I don't know if I've earned that privilege. But your grandmother would have wanted you to have it. She would have loved you so much. Ava looked at her parents. Matthew could see the longing in her eyes. She loved her violin, practiced for hours, dreamed of playing in orchestras. Coco knelt beside Ava. Baby girl, it's your choice. Ava reached out slowly and took the case. She opened it carefully, reverently. Inside was a beautiful instrument, smaller than a full-size violin, the wood glowing with a deep amber color. A piece of paper was tucked inside. Ava pulled it out and unfolded it. It was a letter, written in elegant cursive. Can you read it to me? Ava asked, handing it to Jason. Jason's hands shook as he took the letter. He cleared his throat and began. To my future grandchild. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone, but you're here, and that makes my heart full even in absence. This violin has been in our family for 3 generations. It was my grandmother's, then my mother's, then mine. Now it's yours. Music saved me when words failed. It spoke truths my voice couldn't. It connected me to people across every barrier. Race, class, language, pain. When you play, you're not just making sound. You're making a bridge between souls. I hope you live in a world kinder than mine. I hope your grandfather has softened by the time you meet him. I hope your father has found someone who loves him for who he is, not what he has. I hope you know you are loved beyond measure across time, across even death itself. Asterisk, play beautifully. Play honestly. Play with your whole heart. All my love, Grandma Eleanor. By the time Jason finished, everyone was crying. Ava clutched the violin case to her chest. She knew about me. She hoped for you, Coco said, her own voice thick with tears. She hoped so hard. Ava looked up at Jason. Thank you for keeping it safe for me. Jason broke down completely, sobbing on the doorstep. Matthew made a decision. He stepped aside. Come in, he said quietly. 1 hour later. Carter family living room. Jason sat on the edge of the couch like he might be asked to leave at any moment. Ava had played a simple piece on Eleanor's violin, Twinkle, Twinkle Little Star, and Jason had wept through every note. Now Ava was in bed, but not before she'd hugged her grandfather good night. A brief, tentative hug, but a hug nonetheless. The adults sat in heavy silence. I should go, Jason said, standing. I've intruded enough. Sit down, Matthew said. It wasn't harsh, but it was firm. Jason sat. We need to establish some ground rules, Coco said. Because what just happened? Ava connecting with you, that was beautiful. But it doesn't erase 10 years. It doesn't make everything okay. I know, Jason said quickly. I don't expect. Let me finish, Coco interrupted. You want to be part of Ava's life? You earn it. Slowly. With consistency. You show up when you say you will. You keep your promises. You demonstrate through your actions that you've changed, not just your words. I will, Jason said. Whatever you need. And if you hurt her, Matthew said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. If you say one prejudiced thing, if you make her feel less than in any way, if you put your pride before her well-being, you're gone. Permanently. No second chances. Do you understand? Jason met his son's eyes. I understand. Good, Coco said. Now go home. It's late. We'll talk tomorrow at the office about the transition plan. Jason stood, then paused. Matthew, can I ask you something? What? How did you do it? How did you survive being cut off? How did you build SoulLink from nothing? Matthew was quiet for a long moment. You really want to know? Yes. Matthew walked to a bookshelf and pulled out a worn notebook. He handed it to Jason. Coco and I kept a journal. During the hard years. When we were homeless, when we were struggling, when it felt like we'd never make it. We wrote down every small victory. Every act of kindness someone showed us. Every reason we had to keep going. Jason opened the journal. The first entry was in Matthew's handwriting. Day 1 without Dad's money. Slept in Coco's car. She shared her blanket even though she was cold. She still loves me. That's enough. Jason's eyes filled with tears as he flipped through pages. Week 3. Got jobs at the diner. Manager gave us both an advance on our first paycheck when he found out we were homeless. Human kindness is real. Month 2. MIT accepted me with full scholarship. Coco cried happy tears. I'm going to make her proud. Month 6. Coco got her first production credit. Played her track 100 times. She's going to be a star. Year 2. Proposed with a ring from a pawn shop. She said yes. Richest man in the world. Page after page of struggle and love and determination. Every day we survived, Matthew said. We wrote it down. Because we knew someday we'd need to remember that rock bottom didn't break us. It built us. Jason closed the journal carefully. Can I keep this? Just for tonight. I'll bring it back tomorrow. Matthew hesitated, then nodded. Jason held the journal like it was sacred scripture. Thank you. After Jason left, Coco wrapped her arms around Matthew from behind. You okay? She asked. I don't know, Matthew admitted. Part of me wants to believe he's really changing. but part of me is just waiting for the other shoe to drop. That's trauma talking, Coco said gently. You've been hurt by him so deeply that your brain is trying to protect you from being hurt again. What if I'm making a mistake? Letting him near Ava? Then we'll handle it, Coco said. Together. Like we handle everything. The next morning, SoulLink headquarters. The transition team had assembled in the main conference room. Sarah Chen and her legal team. Marcus and the tech division. Representatives from Statham Industries' various departments. And Jason, who sat quietly in the back, a notepad in front of him, looking like a student rather than the former CEO. Matthew stood at the head of the table. Let's be clear about what we're doing here, he began. This isn't a hostile takeover. This isn't a revenge plot. This is a rescue mission. Statham Industries employs 17,000 people. Those people have families, mortgages, dreams. Our job is to save their livelihoods while completely restructuring how the company operates. He pulled up a presentation. First, we're implementing immediate ethics reforms. Every executive, every manager, every employee will undergo training on ethical business practices, diversity and inclusion, and corporate responsibility. Murmurs around the table. Second, we're establishing an anonymous whistleblower system so that what happened with Ashworth, Crenshaw, and Liu can never happen again. Third, we're converting to a partial employee ownership model. 20% of company shares will be distributed to employees based on tenure and contribution. One of the Statham Industries executives, a man in his 50s named Gerald, raised his hand. That's going to dilute shareholder value significantly. Good, Matthew said flatly. Shareholder value has been prioritized over human value for too long. This company will be profitable and ethical. Not one or the other. Gerald shifted uncomfortably. With all due respect, Mr. Carter, you're very young. You've built one successful company in a niche market. Statham Industries is a conglomerate with diverse holdings. The business world doesn't run on idealism. No, Coco said, standing up from where she'd been sitting to the side. It runs on power. And right now we have it. The question is, are you going to be part of the solution, Gerald, or are you going to be part of what we're cleaning out? Gerald's face reddened. I've been with this company for 23 years. And in those 23 years, Marcus interrupted, pulling up financial data, your division has had 18 HR complaints for discrimination, 7 settled lawsuits for workplace harassment, and a turnover rate of 47%. You've been part of the problem for 23 years, Gerald. Time to be part of the solution or get out. Gerald looked to Jason, clearly expecting support. Jason didn't even look up from his notepad. Mr. Statham. Gerald prompted. Jason finally raised his eyes. I'm not in charge anymore, Gerald. Mr. Carter is. And if he says you're part of the problem, then I suggest you listen. Because I built a culture that allowed men like you to thrive, and look where it got me. Gerald's mouth fell open. Meeting adjourned, Matthew said. Gerald, you have until end of day to submit your resignation or a detailed plan for how you're going to reform your division. Choose wisely. As people filed out, Jason approached Matthew. That was brutal, he said quietly. That was necessary, Matthew corrected. You built this company on fear and compliance. I'm going to rebuild it on accountability and respect. It won't be comfortable for people who benefited from the old way. I know, Jason said. And for what it's worth, you're a better leader than I ever was. Before Matthew could respond, his phone rang. It was Principal Morrison again. His stomach dropped. This is Matthew. Mr. Carter, I'm so sorry, but there's been an incident. What happened? Ava got into a physical altercation with another student, a 6th grader named Brandon Whitmore. He made some racially charged comments about your family, and Ava. She hit him. Matthew closed his eyes. Is she hurt? She has a split lip. Brandon has a black eye. Mr. Carter, I'm going to have to suspend her. It's school policy. I'm on my way. He hung up and looked at Coco and Jason, both of whom had clearly heard. I'll come with you, Coco said immediately. Me too, Jason added. No, Matthew said to his father. This is family business. I know, Jason interrupted. But she's my granddaughter. And if some child made racist comments about my family, I want to be there. Please. Matthew wanted to say no. Wanted to keep Jason at arm's length. But he saw something in his father's eyes. Genuine anguish, genuine desire to help. Fine, Matthew said. But you follow our lead. Oak Ridge Academy. Principal Morrison's office. Ava sat in the same chair as before, but this time there was a defiance in her posture. Her lip was swollen, a small cut bleeding slightly. But her eyes were fierce. Brandon Whitmore sat across from her with his mother, a woman in expensive athleisure wear who looked ready for battle. Mrs. Whitmore, Principal Morrison began. Thank you for coming. My son has a black eye, Mrs. Whitmore interrupted. Because this girl attacked him unprovoked. That's not what happened, Ava said hotly. Ava, quiet, Morrison said, but there was sympathy in her eyes. Matthew, Coco, and Jason entered the office. Mrs. Whitmore's eyes widened when she saw them. Oh, you brought your whole family, she said snidely. Including the grandfather who just got exposed for corporate fraud? Jason flinched, but Matthew stepped forward. What did your son say to my daughter? He asked, his voice deadly calm. Brandon didn't say anything, Mrs. Whitmore defended. He was just discussing current events. He said our family was full of thieves and criminals. Ava burst out. He said Mommy only married Daddy for money and that Grandpa Jason should be in jail. He said mixed kids like me are confused and don't belong anywhere. The room went silent. He's 11 years old, Brandon mumbled. I was just repeating what I heard my parents say. Mrs. Whitmore went pale. Jason moved forward suddenly, and for a moment Matthew thought his father might do something rash. But instead, Jason knelt in front of Brandon. Son, Jason said quietly, do you know what the worst thing about being rich is? Brandon blinked, confused. It's that you start to believe that having money makes you better than other people. That your wealth means you're smarter, more valuable, more deserving of respect. Jason's voice was gentle but firm. I spent 63 years believing that lie, and it cost me everything that mattered. He gestured to Matthew and Coco. This man is my son. He built a billion-dollar company from nothing because I threw him out for loving a woman I thought was beneath us. And you know why I thought that? Because of her skin color and her bank account. I was wrong. I was cruel. And I lost 10 years with my son because of my prejudice. Jason looked at Ava. And this brilliant, brave, beautiful girl is my granddaughter. I didn't know she existed until 3 days ago because my racism and pride blinded me to the greatest blessing of my life. He turned back to Brandon. So when you repeat your parents' words, when you call people criminals and say mixed children are confused, you're making the same mistake I made. You're judging people's worth by things that don't matter instead of by their character and their actions. Brandon looked at his mother, then at the floor. I'm sorry, he mumbled. Don't apologize to me, Jason said. Apologize to Ava. Brandon looked at Ava. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said those things. Ava stared at him for a long moment. You gave me a black eye last month when you accidentally hit me with a dodgeball. You called my friend Jasmine the N-word. You trip kids in the hallway and then say it was their fault for not watching where they're going. Brandon's face reddened. So I don't accept your apology, Ava said clearly. Because you're not sorry for being mean. You're sorry you got caught. There's a difference. Mrs. Whitmore bristled. Now see here. No, you see here, Coco said, her voice cutting like a blade. Your son has been bullying my daughter and other children for months. We have documentation. Witness statements. And now he's graduated to racist harassment. Ava was wrong to hit him, and she'll face appropriate consequences at home. But don't you dare act like your child is the victim here. I'll be taking Brandon out of this school, Mrs. Whitmore said icily. Clearly, the environment here isn't suitable. That's probably for the best, Principal Morrison said diplomatically, since we were about to recommend the same thing. After the Whitmores left, Morrison turned to Ava. "Ava, you know our policy on violence." "Yes, ma'am." "You'll be suspended for 3 days." Ava nodded, accepting it. "But off the record." Morrison added quietly, "Good for you for standing up for yourself. Just maybe use words next time." In the car on the way home, Ava sat between Matthew and Coco in the backseat while Jason drove at Matthew's request. "I'm not sorry I hit him," Ava said. "I know," Matthew said. "And honestly, part of me is proud. But baby girl, violence can't be your first response." "It wasn't my first response," Ava said, her voice small but firm. "I told him to stop 3 times. I told the teacher twice last week when he was being mean. But nobody listened. So I made him listen." Matthew and Coco exchanged a look over their daughter's head. "Sometimes," Coco said carefully, "the system fails us. Sometimes people in authority don't protect us the way they should. And when that happens, we have to protect ourselves." "But," Matthew added, "there are ways to protect yourself that don't put you in danger. Violence should always be the last resort, not because it's wrong to defend yourself, but because the world will judge you more harshly for it than it judges the person who attacked you first." "That's not fair," Ava said. "No," Jason said quietly from the front seat, surprising them all. "It's not fair. But your father is right. The world holds some people to different standards. And it's wrong. It's deeply, fundamentally wrong. But until we change that world, we have to be smart about how we navigate it." He caught Ava's eye in the rearview mirror. "Your father and mother have been fighting that unfairness their whole lives. Building companies that value people over profit. Creating opportunities for people the world overlooks. Changing the system from the inside. That's the real fight. And it's harder than throwing a punch, but it lasts longer." Ava considered this. "Is that what you're doing now, Grandpa? Fighting the real fight?" Jason's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "I'm trying to, sweetheart. I'm very new at it. But I'm trying." When they got home, Ava went to her room to practice on Eleanor's violin. The sound of it, tentative at first, then growing stronger, floated through the house. Matthew, Coco, and Jason sat in the kitchen. "Thank you," Matthew said to his father, "for what you said to that boy. It was good." Jason nodded. "I meant every word. Though I'm sure Mrs. Whitmore is already on the phone with her lawyers." "Let her call," Coco said. "We have documentation of her son's behavior going back months." "She's got nothing." Matthew's phone buzzed. It was Marcus. "Marcus, we have a problem. A big one. Can you come to the office? Like now?" "Matthew, how big?" "Marcus. Existential." Matthew showed the text to Coco, who immediately stood. "I'll stay with Ava," Jason offered. If that's all right with you." Matthew hesitated. Every instinct screamed not to leave his daughter alone with the man who'd caused so much pain. But Coco put her hand on his arm. "Baby, we need to trust sometime. And she's upstairs. We'll be 30 minutes away. What's the worst that could happen?" Matthew looked at his father, really looked at him. Saw the hopeful, desperate expression. The genuine desire to do right. "Okay," Matthew said. "But Jason, if anything—" "I know," Jason interrupted. "I won't let you down. I promise." SoulLink headquarters. 4:47 p.m. The office was in chaos. Marcus was at his computer. Fingers flying. Sarah Chen was on the phone, her voice tight with controlled panic. Half the tech team surrounded multiple monitors. "What's happening?" Matthew demanded. Marcus turned, his face grim. "Someone leaked the full acquisition documents. Not the public version, the internal version. With all the financial details, all the restructuring plans, all the dirt we found on the Statham Industries board." "How is that a problem?" Coco asked. "We were going to release most of that anyway." "It's a problem," Sarah said, hanging up her phone, "because someone edited the documents first. They made it look like Matthew is planning to strip Statham Industries for parts, fire 80% of the workforce, and sell off the profitable divisions to foreign investors. Matthew's blood ran cold. That's not remotely true. We know that, Marcus said. But the documents look real. They have your digital signature, official SoulLink letterhead, everything. And they just hit every major news outlet simultaneously. He pulled up a news website. The headline screamed, "Tech Mogul's Revenge. Matthew Carter plans to destroy father's company. Thousands of jobs at risk." "No," Matthew breathed. "No, no, no. We're trying to save those jobs, not." "The stock market doesn't care about truth," Sarah interrupted. "Statham Industries stock is in free fall, down 43% in the last hour. If we don't stop this, the company will be worthless by tomorrow morning." Coco grabbed Matthew's hand. "Who did this? Who could access our internal documents?" "That's what I've been trying to figure out," Marcus said. "The leak came from inside SoulLink's network. Someone with high-level access." "Who has that access?" Matthew demanded. Marcus pulled up a list. "You, me, Coco, Sarah, and about 15 senior executives." "So we have a mole," Coco said. "Not just a mole," Sarah corrected. "Someone with sophisticated tech skills who could forge Matthew's digital signature and make fake documents look authentic. This is professional corporate sabotage." Matthew's mind raced. The board members. Ashworth is in custody, but Crenshaw and Liu are still out there. They have the motive and the connections too. "Already checked," Marcus interrupted. "Both of their devices have been seized by the FBI. They're under 24-hour surveillance. This isn't them." "Then who?" Coco asked. Matthew's phone rang. An unknown number. He answered. "Matthew Carter." "Hello, Matthew." The voice was smooth, cultured, British, and completely unfamiliar. "Or should I call you Mr. Statham? Though I suppose you've rejected that name, haven't you?" "Who is this?" "My name is Nigel Ashworth. Richard's brother. You've been so focused on destroying my family's reputation that I thought it only fair to return the favor." Matthew put the phone on speaker. "What did you do?" he demanded. "I simply showed the world what you really are," Nigel said pleasantly. "A vindictive son using social justice rhetoric to mask a corporate raid. By morning, Statham Industries will be worthless. The acquisition will fall through. 17,000 people will lose their jobs. And everyone will blame you." "Those documents are fake," Matthew said. "Can you prove that?" Nigel countered. "Can you prove it before the stock market opens tomorrow? Before creditors start calling in loans? Before the board votes to reject your acquisition and instead file for bankruptcy protection?" "Why are you doing this?" Coco demanded. "Your brother stole millions of dollars. He's a criminal." "My brother is a businessman who played by the same rules Jason Statham played by for 40 years, Nigel shot back. "But your husband wants to rewrite those rules. He wants to dismantle everything that made Statham Industries profitable." "Well, I won't let that happen." "So you'll destroy the company instead?" Matthew said incredulously. "You'll put thousands of people out of work just to stop me?" "I'll burn it all down before I let some self-righteous, bleeding-heart idealist turn it into a charity," Nigel said coldly. "You want to save those jobs, Matthew? You have until market open tomorrow morning. Withdraw your acquisition, publicly apologize for the misunderstanding about the leaked documents, and walk away. Otherwise, I'll make sure everyone knows that Matthew Carter destroys everything he touches." The line went dead. The room was silent. "Can we trace the call?" Matthew asked. "Already on it," Marcus said. "But he's smart. Probably used a VPN and burner phone." Sarah was typing furiously on her laptop. "We need to issue a statement immediately. Deny the authenticity of the documents. Call this what it is: corporate sabotage." "Who's going to believe us?" Coco asked. "We're the ones who benefit from the acquisition. Of course we'd claim the documents are fake." "We need a third party to verify," Matthew said. "Someone credible." "Someone who?" His phone rang again. This time it was Jason. Matthew, I'm seeing the news. What's happening? We're being sabotaged, Matthew said. Someone forged documents to make it look like I'm planning to strip the company. Who? Nigel Ashworth. Richard's brother. Jason was quiet for a moment. I know Nigel. He's on the Statham Industries Advisory Board. He has access to, oh God. He has access to everything. Company servers, financial records, board communications. Can you help us? Matthew asked. Can you make a statement that the documents are fake? My credibility is shot, Jason said. Nobody's going to believe me. They'll think I'm just protecting you because you're my son. Then what do we do? Matthew's voice cracked with frustration. There was a pause. Then Jason said something unexpected. We fight fire with fire. We expose what Nigel's really protecting. What do you mean? Nigel isn't doing this to protect his brother or the company, Jason said. He's doing it to protect himself. Matthew, there's something I never told you. Something I never told anyone because I was ashamed. What? The shell companies Richard used for the embezzlement? Nigel set them up. He's been skimming money from Statham Industries for 7 years, and he used his brother as the fall guy. Richard doesn't even know. Matthew's eyes widened. You knew about this? I suspected, Jason admitted, but I never had proof. And Nigel? He has connections. Political connections. Media connections. I was afraid of what he'd do if I accused him without evidence. So you did nothing, Matthew said, bitter. I did nothing, Jason agreed, his voice heavy with shame. I was a coward. But Matthew, if we can prove Nigel's involvement, we destroy his credibility. Everything he's saying about you becomes suspect. But we need access to the company servers. We need someone who can get into the system and find the evidence. Matthew looked at Marcus, who was already cracking his knuckles. I can do it, Marcus said. But I need administrative access to Statham Industries network. I can get you that, Jason said. I still have my credentials. They haven't revoked my access yet. Do it, Matthew said. Marcus, find everything. Every email, every transaction, every connection between Nigel and those shell companies. On it. Sarah stood. I'm calling an emergency press conference for 6 a.m. tomorrow. Right before market open. We're going to expose everything. That gives us 13 hours, Coco calculated. Then we better get to work, Matthew said. 11:34 p.m. SoulLink headquarters. The office was littered with empty coffee cups and takeout containers. Matthew's team had been digging through 7 years of financial records, and what they'd found was staggering. Nigel Ashworth hadn't just been embezzling. He'd been running an entire shadow operation, siphoning money from Statham Industries and funneling it into offshore accounts, then using those funds to manipulate stock prices, bribe government officials, and fund political campaigns that benefited his interests. Richard Ashworth's embezzlement? Child's play compared to what his brother had done. This is massive, Sarah breathed, looking at the evidence. This isn't just corporate fraud. This is corruption at the highest levels. Can we prove it all by morning? Matthew asked. We have the financial trails, Marcus said. Email chains. Recorded phone calls. Bank records. It's all here. Then we have him, Coco said. Matthew's phone rang. Jason again. Matthew, turn on the news. Channel 7. Matthew grabbed the remote and switched on the wall-mounted television. A news anchor was mid-sentence. Breaking developments in the Statham Industries scandal. We're now receiving reports that Matthew Carter, CEO of SoulLink Holdings, is under federal investigation for securities fraud and market manipulation in connection with the alleged forged acquisition documents. Matthew felt the floor drop out from under him. What? He breathed. The anchor continued. According to sources close to the investigation, prosecutors believe Carter deliberately leaked false documents to manipulate Statham Industries' stock price, allowing him to purchase the company at a significantly reduced value. If convicted, Carter could face up to 20 years in federal prison. The screen showed a photo of Matthew, A professional headshot that somehow looked sinister in this context. Coco grabbed his hand. This is Nigel. He's escalating. He's framing you, Jason's voice came through the phone. He's got people in the prosecutor's office. Matthew, you need to lawyer up. Now. I didn't do anything wrong, Matthew said numbly. That doesn't matter, Sarah said grimly. If federal prosecutors want to build a case, they can make almost anything look criminal. We need to move up the press conference. We need to release everything we have right now before they can arrest you. If we release it now, without proper verification, Nigel will claim it's desperation, Marcus countered. We need to be strategic. Matthew looked around at his team, these people who'd worked through the night, who believed in his vision, who'd built SoulLink alongside him. And he thought of Ava at home, probably asleep, her violin resting beside her bed. I'm not running, Matthew said quietly. I'm not going to make desperate moves that make me look guilty. We release everything at 6 a.m. as planned. We let the evidence speak for itself. Matthew, Coco said carefully, if they arrest you before then they arrest me, Matthew interrupted. But I won't act like I've done something wrong. I won't give them that satisfaction. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Unknown, last chance. Withdraw the acquisition, or I'll make sure you never see your daughter grow up. You'll be in prison, and she'll grow up knowing her father was a criminal. Is your pride worth that? Nah. Matthew showed the text to the room. He just threatened my daughter, Matthew said, his voice deadly calm. Jason's voice came through the phone speaker. Matthew, don't do anything rash. We have him. The evidence is solid. Just wait until morning. No, Matthew said. I'm done waiting. I'm done playing defense. He looked at Marcus. How fast can you compile everything we have into a single undeniable package? 2 hours, maybe 3. Do it in 1. Sarah, call every journalist you trust. Tell them we have the story of the decade and we're releasing it at midnight. Matthew, that's not enough time to. Then we work faster, Matthew interrupted. Nigel wants to threaten my family? I'm going to destroy him so thoroughly that he'll be lucky if they don't throw away the key. Coco stepped in front of him. Baby, I love your passion, but we need to think strategically. If we rush this. He threatened Ava, Matthew said, his voice breaking. He threatened our daughter, Coco. I can handle attacks on me, on my reputation, on my company. But I will not let anyone threaten my child. Coco searched his eyes, then nodded. Okay. Then we go to war. But we do it smart. She turned to the team. Everyone, here's what we're doing. Marcus, you have 1 hour to compile the evidence. Make it airtight. Sarah, you call journalists, but only the ones who'll verify before they publish. We can't afford sloppy reporting. I'll contact our friends at the SEC and FBI, make sure they know what we're releasing so they can move simultaneously. She looked at Matthew. And you are going to write a statement. Not angry. Not defensive. Just true. You tell your story. From the beginning. Why you're doing this. What you believe in. Who you really are. Matthew nodded. What about Jason? I'm here, Jason's voice came through the phone. What do you need? We need you to go on record, Coco said. Full testimony about everything you know about Nigel. Your suspicions, your evidence, everything. It needs to come from you. There was a long pause. If I do that, Jason said slowly, I'm admitting I knew about corruption and did nothing. I could face criminal charges myself. Yes, Matthew said simply. You could. But you'd also be telling the truth. You'd be protecting Ava. Protecting the 17,000 people whose jobs are on the line. You'd be choosing what's right over what's safe. Another pause. 10 years ago, Jason finally said. You made that same choice. You chose love over safety. And I punished you for it. Now I have a chance to make a different choice. His voice strengthened. Tell me where to be and what to say. 11:58 p.m. SoulLink headquarters. Main conference room. The room was set up like a war room. 3 cameras pointed at a simple backdrop bearing the SoulLink logo. Reporters from 5 major news outlets, carefully vetted by Sarah, sat in chairs with recording equipment. The live stream was ready to broadcast to millions. And at the center of it all stood Matthew Carter, his wife beside him, and his father, for the first time in 10 years, standing with him instead of against him. Marcus gave a thumbs up. "We're live in 30 seconds. Matthew's heart hammered. Everything they'd built, everything they'd fought for, came down to this moment. Coco squeezed his hand. "Remember who you are," she whispered. "Remember why you started." The red lights on the cameras blinked on. Matthew took a deep breath and began. "My name is Matthew Carter. 10 years ago, my name was Matthew Statham, and I was the heir to a billion-dollar empire. Tonight, I'm here to tell you the truth about power, about corruption, and about the price of choosing integrity over inheritance." He glanced at the statement Coco had helped him write, then set it aside. This needed to come from his heart. "When I was 24 years old, I fell in love with a woman named Coco Jones. She was a waitress and a struggling musician. She was brilliant, talented, and kind. She was also black and poor, and to my father that made her unacceptable." Jason flinched visibly, but Matthew continued. "My father gave me an ultimatum. Leave her or lose everything. I chose love. He disowned me, cut me off completely, and told me I'd never be anything without his name." Matthew smiled slightly. He was half right. "I wasn't anything without his name. I was everything. My wife and I spent 4 months homeless. We worked minimum wage jobs. We slept in her car. And we built a life based on values my father's wealth could never buy. Integrity, compassion, and the belief that every human being has inherent worth regardless of their bank account or skin color." He gestured to the evidence packets on the table. 10 years later, I built SoulLink Holdings into a $4 billion company. We revolutionized digital music distribution. We created opportunities for artists who'd been locked out of the industry. We proved that you can be profitable and ethical, successful and compassionate. And when I learned that my father's company was failing, that 17,000 jobs were at risk, I made the choice to help. Not for revenge. Not for vindication. But because those employees deserved better than to be casualties of corporate corruption. He pulled up the first document on the screen behind him. What we found was worse than we imagined. Not only had 3 board members embezzled $47 million, but there was a deeper conspiracy. A conspiracy led by Nigel Ashworth, who has been systematically draining Statham Industries for 7 years. The documents appeared on screen: bank records, emails, transaction histories. Nigel Ashworth created the shell companies that his brother Richard used. He orchestrated the embezzlement scheme. He bribed government officials, manipulated stock prices, and built a network of corruption that extends far beyond one company. Marcus advanced the slides, showing the damning evidence. And when we discovered this, when we prepared to expose it, Nigel didn't defend himself. He attacked. He forged documents to make it look like I was planning to destroy Statham Industries. He leaked those documents to the press. He fed false information to federal prosecutors to frame me for crimes I didn't commit. Matthew's voice hardened. And tonight, he threatened my 10-year-old daughter. He held up his phone, showing the screenshot of Nigel's text message, which was now displayed on the screen behind him. The reporters in the room stirred, murmuring. Nigel Ashworth wanted me to choose between my principles and my family. He wanted me to back down, to let corruption win, to prove that power still trumps truth. Matthew looked directly into the camera. He chose the wrong family to threaten. Coco stepped forward, her presence commanding. "I'm Coco Jones Carter, and I want to speak directly to the people Nigel Ashworth thinks he can intimidate. The employees of Statham Industries who are terrified they'll lose their jobs. The families wondering if they can make their mortgage payments. The people who feel powerless against corrupt systems." Her voice rang with conviction. "Matthew and I have been where you are. We've been poor. We've been dismissed. We've been told we don't matter. And we're here to tell you that you do matter. Your jobs matter. Your livelihoods matter. And we will not let Nigel Ashworth destroy 17,000 lives to protect his criminal enterprise. She pulled up another set of documents. Here's our actual restructuring plan. Not the forged version Nigel released, but the real one. Employee profit sharing, ethical sourcing requirements, diversity initiatives, living wages for all workers. We're not dismantling Statham Industries. We're transforming it into the company it should have been all along. Jason stepped forward then, and the room went utterly silent. Every camera focused on him. "My name is Jason Statham," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "And I am the reason this corruption was able to flourish." He looked directly at the cameras, his blue eyes rimmed with red. "For 40 years, I built a company on the principle that profit justified any action. I created a culture where loyalty was valued over ethics, where questioning authority was punished, where people like Nigel Ashworth could operate with impunity because I cared more about results than methods." His voice broke. "And when my son tried to show me a better way, when he chose love and integrity over wealth and status, I destroyed him. I threw him away. I called the woman he loved terrible, racist things. I told him he was nothing without me." Tears streamed down Jason's face. "I was wrong. About all of it. My son built something beautiful while I presided over corruption. My daughter-in-law created art and opportunity while I extracted and exploited. And my granddaughter, a child I didn't know existed until 4 days ago, embodies everything I claimed to value but never actually practiced. Courage, honesty, and moral clarity." He pulled out a document. "This is my full testimony regarding Nigel Ashworth's criminal activities. I am submitting it to the FBI, the SEC, and every relevant authority. I am willing to face whatever consequences come from my negligence, my willful blindness, and my cowardice in not stopping this sooner." Jason looked at Matthew. "But I will not stand by while Nigel Ashworth threatens my family. I will not allow corruption to win. And I will spend whatever time I have left proving that people can change, that redemption is possible, and that a father's greatest legacy isn't the empire he builds, it's the son who surpasses him." The room was silent except for the sound of camera shutters clicking. Matthew put his hand on his father's shoulder, the first gesture of genuine affection in 10 years. "We are releasing all evidence to federal authorities immediately," Matthew announced. "We are also filing a lawsuit against Nigel Ashworth for defamation, corporate sabotage, and criminal conspiracy. And we are moving forward with the Statham Industries acquisition under the terms we originally proposed." Sarah Chen stepped forward. "We invite any journalist, any investigator, any authority to examine our evidence. It's comprehensive. It's damning. And it's true. Nigel Ashworth's criminal enterprise ends tonight." As if on cue, Marcus's computer pinged. He looked at the screen, then up at Matthew with wide eyes. "FBI just raided Nigel Ashworth's home," he said. "They arrested him 7 minutes ago. They're citing our evidence as probable cause." The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. But Matthew just looked at Coco, at Jason, at his team who'd worked through the night. "It's over," he said quietly. "Not quite," Coco replied, pulling up her phone. "Look at this." She showed him social media. The hashtag I stand with Carter was trending worldwide. Employees from Statham Industries were posting messages of support. Musicians and artists from SoulLink's network were sharing their stories of how the company had changed their lives. And there, in the middle of it all, was a post from an unexpected source. Eleanor Statham Foundation, official Eleanor always believed in second chances and the power of love to transform. Watching her son, daughter-in-law, and granddaughter fight for integrity makes us believe she's smiling down tonight. I stand with Carter. Jason stared at the post, his hand over his mouth. "I didn't know there was a foundation in her name," he whispered. "The hospital created it," Matthew said quietly. "After she died. They used it to fund music therapy programs for terminally ill children. Mom would have loved that." "She loved you," Jason said, his voice breaking. "She loved you so much, Matthew. And she was right about everything. If I'd listened to her, if I'd chosen love over pride, we would have had these 10 years. I would have known Coco. I would have watched Ava grow up. I would have been part of something meaningful instead of presiding over corruption. You can't get those years back, Matthew said. None of us can. But you can choose what you do with the years you have left. Jason nodded, wiping his eyes. I want to do better. I want to be better. I want to earn the right to be called Ava's grandfather. Then you will, Coco said simply. One day at a time. One choice at a time. 6:47 a.m. Carter family home. The sun was rising over Atlanta, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Matthew and Coco had left the office an hour ago, exhausted but triumphant, and come home to find Ava already awake, practicing Eleanor's violin on the back porch. She played beautifully, a simple melody, but filled with feeling. When she saw them, she set down the bow. Did you win? She asked. Matthew smiled, sitting down beside his daughter. We exposed the truth. The bad guy got arrested. And tomorrow, we start rebuilding a company the right way. So you won, Ava repeated. We won, Matthew corrected, pulling her close. All of us. Together. Is Grandpa Jason okay? Ava asked. He was really sad last night. He told me stories about Grandma Eleanor for hours. Matthew's throat tightened. He told you about her? He said she used to play violin just like me, Ava said, and that she believed music could heal people, and that she always saw the best in everyone, even when they didn't deserve it. That sounds like her, Matthew whispered. He cried a lot, Ava added, but I think they were good cries. Like when you cry at the end of movies because you're happy sad. Coco laughed, tears in her own eyes. Happy sad. That's exactly right, baby girl. Matthew's phone buzzed. A text from Jason. Dad, thank you for trusting me with Ava last night. It was the greatest honor of my life. I'm at my lawyer's office preparing my formal testimony. Whatever happens next, I want you to know I'm proud of you. I love you, son. Dad. Matthew showed the text to Coco. You going to respond? She asked. Matthew thought about it, then typed. Matthew, I love you too, Dad. Come to dinner this Sunday. 6 p.m. Coco's making her famous mac and cheese. Don't be late. The response came immediately. Dad, I'll be there. I promise. 2 weeks later. Statham Industries headquarters, now Statham Carter Industries. The company had been transformed. Not just in name but in spirit. The cold, imposing lobby now featured artwork from local Atlanta artists. The employee cafeteria offered healthy, affordable meals. And most importantly, the culture was changing. Slowly, but genuinely. Matthew stood in the main auditorium, addressing the 17,000 employees via video conference to all locations worldwide. 2 weeks ago, this company was on the brink of collapse, he began. Corruption. Fraud. A leadership that valued profit over people. Many of you wondered if you'd have jobs by the end of the month. He smiled. I'm here to tell you that not only do you have jobs, but you're now part owners of this company. 20% of shares have been distributed to employees based on tenure and contribution. Your success is our success. Your voices matter. Your ideas matter. You matter. The auditorium erupted in applause. We have a long road ahead, Matthew continued. We're implementing new ethics training. We're auditing every division to ensure we're operating with integrity. We're establishing partnerships with community organizations to ensure we're giving back to the places we operate. This won't be easy. Change never is. But I believe in what we can build together. Not an empire based on exploitation, but a community based on mutual respect and shared prosperity. He paused. My father built this company on the principle that power was everything. My wife and I are rebuilding it on the principle that people are everything. Thank you for taking this journey with us. As he left the stage, Coco met him in the wings. You're a natural, she said, kissing him. I learned from the best, he replied, pulling her close. They walked through the newly renovated hallways, greeting employees who no longer looked afraid or guarded, but hopeful. In his new office, smaller than Jason's old one, with windows that actually opened and furniture designed for collaboration rather than intimidation, Matthew found a package waiting. It was from Jason, who now worked 3 days a week as a consultant, unpaid at his insistence, and spent the other days volunteering at the Eleanor Statham Foundation. Inside was a framed photograph Matthew had never seen before. It showed Eleanor, heavily pregnant, standing in front of the old Statham estate. She was laughing, her hand on her belly, her eyes bright with joy. On the back, in Jason's handwriting, "Your mother, 3 weeks before you were born. She was so excited to meet you. She loved you before you even took your first breath. I'm sorry I forgot how to show you that kind of love. I'm learning." Dad. Matthew set the photo on his desk, right next to the picture of his own family. Coco, Ava, and him at the Soul Link Foundation ribbon cutting last year. 2 families. 2 legacies. One built on fear, the other on love. And finally, they were beginning to heal. Sunday dinner. Carter family home. The kitchen smelled like heaven. Coco's mac and cheese bubbled in the oven. Collard greens simmered on the stove. Cornbread cooled on the counter. It was soul food in every sense of the word. Food that nourished more than just the body. Ava set the table carefully, making sure Grandpa Jason's place setting was perfect. She'd made him a name card decorated with musical notes. When Jason arrived at exactly 6 p.m., he'd learned that being on time mattered. He carried a bag of groceries. "I brought dessert," he said nervously. "I wasn't sure what to bring, so I got 3 different kinds of pie. And ice cream. And I may have overdone it." Coco laughed, taking the bag. "You definitely overdid it. But we appreciate it. Come in." They sat around the dining table, not the formal one Jason was used to, but a comfortable wooden table that had hosted countless family dinners. Jason looked around at the modest but warm home, at the photos covering the walls, at the artwork Ava had created, at the life his son had built without him. "This is beautiful," he said quietly. "Your home. Your family. It's everything a home should be." "Thank you," Matthew said, passing the mac and cheese. They ate and talked. Jason told stories about Eleanor, real stories, not sanitized versions. How she'd once dumped a bowl of soup on a business partner who'd made a racist comment at a dinner party. How she'd snuck out of fundraisers to go to jazz clubs in the city. How she'd loved fiercely and completely. Ava listened with wide eyes, learning about the grandmother she'd never meet but was growing to love. After dinner, Jason helped with dishes despite Coco's protests. "I need to earn my keep," he insisted. As he washed and she dried, Coco said quietly, "You're doing good, Jason. Real growth is hard. But you're doing it." Jason's hands paused in the soapy water. Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me? For the things I said to you? The way I treated you?" Coco was quiet for a long moment. "Ask me again in a year," she said finally. "After you've shown me a year of consistent change, of showing up, of doing the work, then we'll talk about forgiveness." Jason nodded. "That's fair." 1 year later, at the Eleanor Statham Foundation grand opening, Atlanta, Georgia. The morning sun cast golden light across the newly constructed building in Atlanta's West End. The same neighborhood where Coco had grown up, where dreams had seemed impossible, where poverty had tried to define futures. But today, the Eleanor Statham Foundation for Arts and Education stood as proof that those definitions could be rewritten. The building was beautiful. Modern architecture blended with warm, welcoming design. Murals painted by local artists covered the exterior walls, depicting musical notes transforming into birds, instruments growing from tree roots, children of every background reaching toward stars. Inside, there were music rooms, recording studios, computer labs, art spaces, and a performance hall. All of it free to any child who wanted to learn, to create, to dream. Matthew stood at the entrance with Coco, watching volunteers make final preparations for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. His hand found hers automatically, their fingers intertwining the way they had for 11 years now. Through poverty and wealth, struggle and triumph, pain and healing. "Your mom would have loved this," Coco said softly, looking up at the building that bore Eleanor's name. "She would have loved you," Matthew replied, kissing her forehead. For making sure her legacy became this instead of just a name on a plaque. It had been Coco's idea, 6 months ago, to expand the Eleanor Statham Foundation beyond the hospital's music therapy program. To create something bigger. Something that served the community she'd come from. Something that gave children the opportunities she'd had to fight for. And surprisingly, it had been Jason who donated the initial funding. Nearly all of his remaining personal wealth. I spent 64 years building monuments to my own ego, he'd said when he wrote the check. Let me spend what's left building something that actually matters. Now, Jason stood near the stage, directing volunteers with a gentle authority that would have been unrecognizable a year ago. He wore jeans and a Soul Link t-shirt, the uniform of someone who'd learned that real power came from service, not status. He caught Matthew's eye and waved. Matthew waved back. 12 months of consistency. 12 months of showing up every Sunday for dinner. 12 months of volunteering, of attending therapy, of doing the uncomfortable work of genuine change. Last week, Coco had pulled Jason aside after dinner. I forgive you, she'd said simply. Jason had broken down crying in her kitchen, and she'd held him while he sobbed out a year's worth of gratitude and relief. Not just for me, Coco had continued, but because Ava deserves to have a grandfather who isn't weighed down by unforgiven sin. And because Eleanor would have wanted this. She believed in second chances. So do I. Now, watching Jason laugh with volunteers, a genuine unguarded laugh, Matthew felt something shift in his chest. The anger he'd carried for 10 years, the wound that had driven him to succeed but had also kept him up nights, had finally begun to truly heal. Mommy. Daddy. Ava came running across the lawn, her natural hair styled in intricate braids decorated with golden beads, wearing a yellow dress that reminded Matthew painfully of the one Coco had worn the night they'd met his father all those years ago. Except Ava wore it with the confidence of a child who'd never been told she wasn't enough. They want me to perform at the ceremony. Ava said breathlessly. Ms. Rodriguez said I could play Grandma Eleanor's violin for the opening piece. Can I? Please. Of course you can, baby girl, Coco said, beaming with pride. What are you going to play? Matthew asked. Ava's expression turned serious. I wrote something. A piece called, From Broken to Beautiful. It's about how things that break can be put back together stronger than before. About families and second chances. Matthew felt his throat tighten. His 11-year-old daughter had somehow captured in music what he'd struggled to put into words for a year. That sounds perfect, he managed. Ava hugged them both, then ran off to practice, her violin case bouncing against her back. She's going to be extraordinary, Coco said, watching her go. She already is, Matthew replied. Because she has you as a mother. She has us both, Coco corrected. And now she has a grandfather who shows up. A legacy of love instead of pain. That's what we built, Matthew. Not just companies or foundations. A family that breaks cycles instead of perpetuating them. 2 hours later, the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Hundreds of people filled the courtyard. Community members. Employees from Statham Carter Industries. Musicians from Soul Link's network. Media covering the event. And children, so many children, whose eyes were wide with possibility. Matthew stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd. A year ago, he began. My father and I stood in his office as enemies. He'd lost his empire. I'd gained the power to destroy him completely. And we both had to choose what kind of men we wanted to be. He gestured to Jason, who stood off to the side, his eyes already wet with tears. My father chose humility over pride. Truth over comfort. Change over stagnation. It wasn't easy. Real change never is. But he did the work. He showed up. He proved that people aren't defined by their worst moments, but by what they choose to do after them. Jason wiped his eyes, his shoulders shaking slightly. And I had to choose between revenge and redemption. Between punishing the man who hurt me and giving him the chance to become someone better. I chose grace. Not because my father deserved it, but because my daughter deserved to have a grandfather. Because my wife taught me that love is stronger than hatred. Because my mother believed in second chances. Matthew's voice strengthened. This foundation represents what's possible when we choose love over fear, community over individualism, investment in people over extraction of profit. It's named for Eleanor Statham, a woman who believed every child deserved the chance to discover their gifts, regardless of their zip code or bank account. He looked at Coco, who stood near the stage with Ava. And it's funded by Jason Statham, a man who spent his life building walls and is now spending his final chapters building bridges. Who learned that the greatest legacy isn't what you leave behind in buildings or bank accounts, but in the lives you touch and the change you make possible. The crowd applauded, and Jason stepped forward, taking the microphone with trembling hands. I don't deserve to speak here, Jason said quietly. I spent most of my life being exactly the kind of person who would have opposed a foundation like this. Who would have said it was wasteful, that poor children should just work harder, that systemic barriers were excuses. He looked directly at the children in the audience. I was wrong. About everything. And I've spent the past year trying to learn what my wife knew, what my son and daughter-in-law have always known. That every human being has inherent worth. That opportunity shouldn't depend on the circumstances of your birth. That talent and genius exist everywhere, but access doesn't. Jason's voice broke. Eleanor believed in music as a universal language. She believed in education as liberation. She believed that investing in children was investing in a better world. This foundation is my apology for not believing those things sooner. My attempt to do something meaningful with whatever time I have left. He turned to Matthew and Coco. But more than that, it's my thank you. To my son for showing me that strength isn't domination but compassion. To my daughter-in-law for teaching me that grace isn't weakness but the hardest kind of courage. And to my granddaughter for giving me a reason to become a man worth knowing. He stepped back from the microphone, and Ava came forward with her violin. The crowd fell silent. Ava raised Eleanor's violin to her shoulder, positioned the bow, and began to play. The piece started soft and melancholy. Broken notes, dissonant chords, the musical representation of pain and fracture. Matthew could hear his own disownment in those notes. His mother's death. The years of struggle. But then the melody shifted. The broken pieces began to find harmony. The dissonance resolved into something beautiful. Individual notes that had sounded wrong alone created stunning chords together. The music swelled, building toward something powerful and whole. It was redemption in musical form. Growth. Healing. The sound of a family finding its way back to itself. By the time Ava played the final note, there wasn't a dry eye in the courtyard. The applause was thunderous. Ava took a bow, then ran to her parents. Matthew scooped her up even though she was really getting too big for it, and Coco wrapped her arms around them both. Jason stood to the side, watching his family with an expression of wonder and gratitude. Then Ava reached out her hand to him. Come here, Grandpa, she said. You're part of this too. Jason's face crumpled, but he stepped forward, and Ava pulled him into the family embrace. The four of them stood there, Matthew, Coco, Ava, and Jason, while cameras flashed and the crowd cheered and a new chapter began. That evening, Carter family home. The celebration had lasted all day. Children had explored the foundation, trying instruments, recording their voices, painting murals. Families had toured the facilities with awe. The community had come together in a way that reminded everyone why this work mattered. Now, exhausted but happy, the Carter family sat on their back porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Ava had fallen asleep with her head in Coco's lap, worn out from the day's excitement and the emotional weight of her performance. Jason sat in the rocking chair he'd claimed as his own over the past year of Sunday dinners, looking more peaceful than Matthew had ever seen him. I got the final report from the prosecutors today, Jason said quietly. Nigel took a plea deal. 23 years in federal prison. All his assets seized. The other board members are looking at similar sentences. Good, Matthew said simply. And Statham Carter Industries posted record profits last quarter, Jason continued, while also increasing employee satisfaction scores by 47% and reducing environmental impact by 32%. Turns out ethics and profit aren't mutually exclusive, Coco said. Who knew? Jason chuckled. You did. You both did. I'm just grateful you let a stubborn old man learn it the hard way. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the evening sounds of the neighborhood. Finally, Jason spoke again, his voice soft. Matthew, Coco, I need to tell you something. I went to the doctor last week. For a checkup I'd been putting off. Matthew's stomach clenched. And I'm fine, Jason said quickly. Healthier than I have any right to be at 65. But sitting in that waiting room, I kept thinking about Eleanor. About how she ran out of time before we could make things right between us. He looked at his son. And I realized that these Sunday dinners, these moments with Ava, this work we're doing together, this is time I didn't think I'd have. Time I didn't deserve. And I don't want to waste a second of it. Jason pulled an envelope from his pocket. So I had my lawyers draw this up. It's my will. Everything I have left, which admittedly isn't much after the foundation donation, goes into a trust for Ava's education. And I've named you both as executors of Eleanor's foundation when I'm gone. Jason, Coco started. Let me finish, Jason said gently. I don't know how many years I have left. Could be 1, could be 20. But however many it is, I want them to count. I want to keep showing up. Keep learning. Keep being a grandfather worth having. He handed the envelope to Matthew. But I also want you to know that if I died tomorrow, I'd die grateful. Because you gave me something I'd lost decades ago. A family. A purpose. A chance to be better than I was. Matthew set the envelope aside and stood, crossing to his father. He pulled Jason into a hug, a real one, not tentative or obligatory, but full and genuine. You're not going anywhere for a long time, Matthew said fiercely. Ava needs her grandfather. And honestly, I think I need my father. Jason's arms tightened around his son, and he sobbed into Matthew's shoulder. Years of regret and relief and gratitude pouring out. Coco watched them with tears streaming down her face, her hand gently stroking Ava's hair. This was what they'd built. Not just companies or foundations or wealth, but healing, forgiveness, love that was stronger than pain, a legacy that would outlast any empire. 6 months later, at the SoulLink Annual Gala, Atlanta, the ballroom glittered with lights and laughter. This was SoulLink's signature event, a celebration of the artists they'd helped break into the industry, the communities they'd served, the lives they'd changed. But this year was special. Coco took the stage, stunning in a gold gown that caught the light like liquid sunshine. She'd just released her 5th album, a deeply personal work that had debuted at #1 and earned her 3 Grammy nominations. But tonight, she wasn't here as a musician. 10 years ago, Coco said into the microphone, her voice filling the ballroom, I was a waitress with a dream. I had a demo tape I'd recorded in my friend's basement and about $300 to my name. I thought love was a luxury I couldn't afford. I thought success meant choosing between my art and my heart. She found Matthew in the crowd, and he smiled. Then I met a boy who showed me that real wealth isn't in your bank account but in who you choose to love. Who taught me that integrity isn't a liability but a foundation. Who believed in me when the world said we were crazy. We built SoulLink on that belief, that talent exists everywhere, that art matters, that every voice deserves to be heard. And tonight, I'm honored to announce our latest initiative. The screen behind her lit up. The Matthew and Coco Carter Scholarship Fund. Full-ride education for underprivileged youth pursuing arts and technology. The crowd erupted in applause. 100 full scholarships per year, Coco continued, covering tuition, housing, supplies, and living expenses. For students who have the talent and drive but not the financial means. Because nobody should have to choose between their dreams and their survival. She looked at Jason, who sat at a table near the front with Ava beside him. This fund is co-sponsored by the Eleanor Statham Foundation and Statham Carter Industries. Because when families heal, they can change the world together. Ava stood up suddenly, climbing onto her chair despite her grandfather's gentle attempt to stop her. My parents are the best, she shouted, making the entire ballroom laugh. Matthew made his way to the stage, joining his wife. He pulled her close, kissing her in front of everyone, not caring about protocol or professionalism. Because this woman, this life, this purpose was everything. "I love you," he whispered against her lips. "I know," she whispered back, smiling. "You chose me when it cost you everything. I've known since the day you walked away from that mansion. Best decision I ever made." Later that night, Carter family home. They'd kicked off their fancy shoes the moment they got home. Coco's gold gown was draped over a chair. Matthew's bow tie was abandoned on the counter. Ava was in her pajamas, doing homework at the kitchen table even though it was nearly 11 p.m. because she'd convinced them she could stay up late for the gala. Jason had come home with them, something that had become natural over the past 18 months. He had his own room now in their guest house, decorated with photos of Eleanor and Ava, a space that felt like home. Matthew made hot chocolate, a Sunday night tradition they'd extended to special occasions, while Coco helped Ava with her math homework. "Grandpa Jason," Ava said suddenly, looking up from her multiplication tables, "did you ever think things would turn out like this?" Jason considered the question seriously. "No, sweetheart. When your father walked out of my house 10 years ago, I thought I'd never see him again. I thought I'd die alone and bitter, surrounded by money but empty of love." "But you didn't," Ava pointed out. "No," Jason agreed. "Because your parents are better people than I ever was. They gave me grace I didn't deserve and a chance I hadn't earned. They taught me that it's never too late to change, to grow, to become who you were always meant to be." He looked at Matthew and Coco. "They saved my life. Not my company or my reputation, but my actual life. They gave me a reason to wake up in the morning, a family to love, a purpose beyond profit. I'm only here, truly here, not just physically alive."